You're watching the Blender modeling course. This course is a compilation of 6 chapters that will make you understand about the concept of 3D modeling in complete detail. Now coming to the content of this course, in the chapter number 1, we have focused on creating the 3D model of a pocket watch, and along with that, you will understand about the basic modeling tools. Then in the chapter number 2, we'll take a step ahead and we'll be creating a 3D model of a guitar. Then in the chapter number 3, we'll be learning about some more modeling tools and techniques, and we'll create the 3D model of a radio. Then in the chapter number 4, we'll be creating a complex 3D model of a camera. Then moving to the chapter number 5, we'll be learning about a special topic which is the cloth physics, and we'll use it to create a 3D model of a leather couch in Blender. And then in the final chapter, which will be the chapter number 6, we'll be creating a scene of a treasure chest, and we'll also be understanding about the rigid body physics which we'll use to create an animation where we'll have some gold coins falling into the treasure chest. So if you are ready to master the concept of 3D modeling in Blender, then let's begin with the chapter number 1 of this series. So to begin with, I've opened a new Blender file with the default layout, and whenever I press any key on the keyboard, its name will get displayed on this bottom left side automatically in every chapter. Now the first step that we have to do for modeling the pocket watch is to have a reference image in order to get an idea of what exactly we'll be making. So for this purpose, I tried searching for some images on Google of a simple pocket watch with gears, and all these results came up in the Google image section. And yes, since we are choosing only a reference image, we won't be exactly copying it for our 3D model, but we'll only take an idea of exactly what we need to model in our Blender project. And this is suggested not only for this pocket watch model, but also for any object that you wish to model in your Blender file. And it totally depends upon you that which particular image you wish to choose for reference. And for now, I'm planning to choose this particular image as the reference image for the pocket watch. I will drop the link of this image in the description of this video so that you can download it from there. So once you have saved this image in your PC, we'll return back to our Blender file, and now we need to import the image that we downloaded in this Blender file. And to do this, we'll first open an image editor over here. And to do this, simply take your pointer to any of the corners of any editor, and when your cursor changes to this symbol, you need to left click and drag your cursor like this. This will add the space for a new editor. Now to change the area of any of these editor windows, simply keep your cursor on the space between the two editors, and when the cursor changes to this double-headed arrow, you need to left click and drag your cursor like this. In this way, the area of that editor will get changed. Now to open the image editor, I'll click on this icon, and from here, select the image editor. This image editor will be used to import the image that we downloaded as the reference image of the pocket watch. Now to import that image, we need to click on the open button in the image editor, which we currently can't see because of lesser area. And to solve this problem, I simply need to drag the middle mouse button in this direction, and by doing this, we'll be able to see all these options present on the other side also. Now to import the reference image, click on this open button, and after this, it will ask you to choose the folder where you have saved that particular reference image. Now select that image and click on the open image button, and by doing this, the reference image will get added in the image editor. Now to zoom in, we'll simply use the scroll wheel, and with this, we have learned how to add a reference image in our Blender file. Now let's start with the process of modeling, and the first thing that we need to do is to add the basic object which resembles the shape of the 3D model that we wish to create. And for this purpose, let's first open the add menu by pressing Shift+A, then go to mesh, and over here, we have several objects to choose from. To create a pocket watch, the first object, which is the plane, will not be a good idea. Similarly, the cube will also not be a good idea to start with the modeling. However, we can use a circle because the shape of circle resembles with that of a pocket watch. Then we have the UV sphere and the icosphere, and obviously both of these are also not that good in order to model the pocket watch. Then we have the cylinder, which can be a slightly better alternative than the circle that we were previously thinking. Then over here we have the cone, the torus object, the grid, and the monkey object, and none of these can be useful to start with the modeling of this pocket watch. As a result, after analyzing all the mesh objects, I think that we should choose to add the cylinder object. So first of all, let's delete this default cube by pressing X and select delete. Now to add the cylinder, press Shift+A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder. Now our main target throughout the modeling process is basically to attain a shape which looks similar to the one that we want to create. So in this particular case also, we first have to reduce the length of the cylinder, and to do this, we have to enter the edit mode of the cylinder. So press the tab key to enter the edit mode, and as the name suggests, this edit mode is the place where you can edit the vertices, the edges, and the faces of your mesh object. By default, default, for any object, whenever we enter the edit mode for the first time, all of the vertices will be selected, and as a result, they're highlighted with the orange color. If you want to deselect them, you can simply left click anywhere around the 3D viewport, and then all of them will get deselected. Now suppose I wish to select only a particular vertex of this cylinder model, then simply left click on that vertex and it will get selected. Now moving ahead, in order to scale down the cylinder object, we first need to select all of these vertices, and to do this, the shortcut is to press A on the keyboard. Now to reduce its height, we basically need to change the scaling of this object, and the shortcut to scale is to press S, and if I move my cursor, then you will notice that the scaling of this object will begin to change. However, by default, the scaling will be applied to all the three axes, meaning the x-axis represented by this red line, the y-axis represented by the green line, and the z-axis, which by default is hidden in Blender, but to view it, you can click on this icon, and in the viewport overlays, go to this axis option and turn on the z-axis. With this blue colored line will appear, which is representing the z-axis. Now in this case, we need to reduce the scaling of the cylinder object only in the z-axis, and to do this, press S, and after that, press the Z key in order to restrict the scaling of this object only in the z-axis. So let's scale it down like this, and once you have finalized, simply click the left mouse button. Now moving ahead, suppose you want this outer part of the cylinder to have more of a curved shape, and to achieve such a result, we should be having an entire loop of vertices in between these two loops of vertices. And to do this thing, we basically need to add a loop cut in this area, and the shortcut to add a loop cut is to press Ctrl plus R and then keep your cursor around that region where you want to add this particular loop cut. Then once you have finalized this, simply left click, and if I try to move my cursor, then you will notice that this loop of vertices or the edge loop that we created is moving like this. Now here you will have two options. If you want to finalize a particular location of your own choice for this edge loop, then you need to left click. However, if you want the default position to be applied for this edge loop, then simply click the right mouse button. This will automatically place the edge loop in the center or the default position. Now to make this area around the sides more curved and rounded, we need to scale up this edge loop. So with all the vertices selected in this particular edge loop, press S to scale it up and left click to finalize. By doing this, the region around the sides is now having a slight curved or a rounded look. Similarly, if you want to add some more roundness to the side areas, then you can add some more loop cuts in these regions. So to do this, press Ctrl plus R, and with the cursor in this upper region of the sides, we'll be adding a loop cut over here. But before finalizing, if I begin to scroll the middle mouse button, then you will notice that the number of these loop cuts will begin to increase. Similarly, if I scroll down, then the number of loop cuts will reduce. So in this way, you can set the number of loop cuts to be added in a particular region. In order to finalize, press the left mouse button, and to cancel the movement, we'll click the right mouse button. Now to give it a curved appearance, let's scale it down by pressing S and left click to finalize. To make its shape look better, we'll be individually selecting this lower edge loop and we'll slightly scale it up. And to do this, let's first deselect everything, and to select this edge loop, the shortcut is to hold down the Alt key and left click on any of the edge of that particular edge loop. Now press S to scale it up and left click to finalize. Similarly, with the Alt key holded, if I left click on this edge, then this particular edge loop will get selected. Now moving ahead, we'll also be scaling down this top part of the cylinder, and to do this, we'll be selecting this top edge loop by holding the Alt button and left clicking here, then press S to scale it down and left click to finalize. Similarly, let's add a loop cut on this lower part also in order to give it a slightly curved appearance. So with my cursor over here, I'll press Ctrl plus R to add a loop cut, then left click to finalize and right click to cancel the movement. Now press S to scale it up, and after adjusting, left click to finalize. Now let's return back to the object mode, so press the tab key, and now this is how the basic structure of the pocket watch is looking right now. Now by default, all the faces of the object are shaded flat. However, if you want to give them some smoothness, then simply right click in the object mode and select Shade Auto Smooth. With this, all the faces of our mesh object will now be shaded smooth. Now moving ahead, let's also make some changes in the edit mode of this object in order to make this top face slightly more distinguishable from the remaining model. So press tab to go into the edit mode, and we need to select this particular edge loop on the second number. So with the Alt key holded, I'll left click on this edge, and once this is selected, I will press S to scale it down like this. Similarly, I'll select this edge loop now, which is on the third number, and will slightly scale it down like this in order to give this pocket watch a slightly more realistic look. Now let's return back to the object mode by pressing the tab key, and with this, the basic structure of the pocket watch is completely ready. Now it is also recommended to turn on the cavity option by clicking on this drop down arrow and turning on the cavity from here, and by doing this, we'll be able to see the edges of a 3D model in a much better way. Now moving ahead, the next thing that we're going to do is to apply a modifier on this object, which is known as the bevel modifier, and it will give a much more natural and a realistic look to this model. But before that, let's first understand about what exactly is meant by the term bevel, and for this, I will be adding a cube in the scene. So press Shift plus A, go to Mesh and select Cube. Now to move this cube in the Y axis, press G and Y and place it over here. Now press Tab to go to the edit mode And with all the vertices selected, if I want to apply the bevel tool, then I have to use the shortcut, which is to press Ctrl plus B, and if I move my cursor, then you will notice that the bevel effect is being applied on the selected vertices. The use of this tool is that it kind of creates a curved or a rounding effect around the edges of the selected object. Also, if I scroll up the middle mouse button, then you will notice that the number of edges for the bevel effect will begin to increase. Now if I left click to finalize and return back to the object mode, then you will see that this cube with the bevel effect is having a rounded appearance, giving it a natural look. Now just like the bevel tool, we also have a modifier which makes our work easier since we can directly use it in this properties editor without having to go to the edit mode. So to understand about the bevel modifier, I'll first delete this cube by pressing X. Now select this object with which we are creating the pocket watch by left clicking on it, and now to add the bevel modifier, go to the properties editor and click on this tool icon which is for the modifier properties. Now click on add modifier, then in the generate, here we have the bevel modifier on the second number. So we'll select this, and suddenly you will notice that a slight bevel effect can be seen on the selected object. And now in the bevel modifier, we have two important options. The first is the amount, which obviously controls the amount of bevel effect, and the second is the segments, which controls the number of edges to be created while adding the bevel effect. So for the amount, I'll reduce it to somewhere close to 0.05 or 0.07, and in the segments, I will keep this to the default value of 1. Now the next thing that we're going to do is to understand about the subdivision surface modifier. This particular modifier will help to subdivide the number of vertices in any object, and because of that, the number of vertices in the object will increase. And always remember that higher the number of vertices, more realistic will be the object's appearance. To understand this concept in more detail, we'll take the example of the monkey object. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh, and from here select the monkey object. Let's move it in the x-axis by pressing G and X and place it over here. Now by default, the selected monkey object is having a particular number of vertices, which you can see by going to the edit mode. However, if I right click, then this vertex menu will appear where the first option that you have is subdivide, and with all of these vertices selected, if I click on the subdivide option, then every single vertex will get subdivided, and as a result, the number of these vertices will increase. And the same effect can also be achieved by using a modifier which is known as the subdivision surface modifier. So if I undo this by using the shortcut Ctrl plus Z and return back to the object mode, then in the modify properties, I'll go to the add modifier, and in the generate, select the subdivision surface modifier. And with this, you will notice that the selected object will now have a highly realistic look, and all this is just because of adding the subdivision surface modifier. Then here we have the option to set the levels viewport, which is basically the number of subdivisions to be performed on the vertices. So in the levels viewport, if I increase this value, then you will notice that because of increase in the number of subdivisions, the amount of realism that this monkey object is having has also increased. Now in a very similar way, we'll also be applying the subdivision surface modifier to this pocket watch that we created. But before that, let's first delete this monkey object by pressing X. Now I'll select this pocket watch, and in the modify properties, go to add modifier, then in the generate category, select the subdivision surface modifier. And with this, the subdivision surface modifier is now added to the selected object, giving it a slightly more realistic look. If you want, you can increase the levels viewport to a value of 2, but in this case, I'll be going for a value of 1 right now. Now moving ahead, let's further work on creating the details of this pocket watch. So press tab to go to the edit mode, and now we have to select this top face and bring it down in order to create the empty or the hollow space. And in order to select the top face, we first need to enter the face mode, and the shortcut to enter the face mode is to press 3, and by doing this, we'll now be able to select any face of the selected object. So basically, for the vertex selection mode, the shortcut is to press 1, then to select the edges, the shortcut is to press 2, and the third mode is to select the faces of the object, which can be enabled by pressing 3. Now I'll select this top face by left clicking on it, and first of all, let's create a small boundary between this outer region and the face that will move down. And to do this thing, we have to use a tool which is known as the inset tool. To use it, press I, and now if I try to move my cursor, then you will notice that the inset faces effect is now being applied to the selected face. So once you have finalized the area of this face which has been created because of inset, you simply need to left click. So in simple words, the inset faces command causes new faces to be created inside or outside a selected geometry. And now to bring this face downwards to create the hollow space, we'll be using a tool which is known as the extrude tool. This particular tool is used to create a duplicate of the selected geometry which will remain connected to the original geometry, and then it can be used to be moved up and down, and also to apply the rotation or the scaling. To understand this thing in more detail, let's return back to the object mode. Now press Shift plus A, then in the mesh, we'll be selecting the cube object. Let's move it in the x-axis and place it over here. Now press tab to go to the edit mode, and with this top face selected, we'll be using and understanding the extrude tool. So to access the extrude tool, simply press the E key, and if I try to move my cursor, then you will notice that a new face has been created which is connected by these edges to the original face or the edge loop of this cube. And now with this extruded face selected, if I try to move it by pressing G, then you will notice that we can freely move it in any direction. Now let's do the same thing with this object also. So return back to the object mode. Let's also delete this cube object that we created by pressing X. Now select the pocket watch, press tab to enter the edit mode, and with this face selected, press E to extrude it, and then if I move my cursor, it will ask us to choose a particular location. However, if I right click, then it will add the extruded face at the same position where we had the original face. Now with this extruded face selected, if I press G to move it and then press Z and move this face down, then you will notice that we are able to move this extruded face in the downward direction. After finalizing, simply click the left mouse button, and with this we have learned how to create an extrusion face and also move it in a particular direction. Now let's return back to the object mode, and in the bevel modifier, I'll increase the number of segments to a value of 2. Now the next thing that we'll do is to create this inside region, which is also called the dial of the watch. And for this, we first need to go to the top view in order to see everything properly. So the shortcut to enable the top view is to press 7 on the numpad, and now to create the dial, we'll be using a circle object. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the circle. Now to view it, we'll be enabling the X-ray mode, and the shortcut to enable the X-ray mode is to press Alt plus Z, and now you can see here that we have the circle added, which is highlighted with the orange color. Also, if you have not made any changes after adding the circle, then you will be able to see this menu which is known as the add circle. And if I open this, then various options will be available, like the number of vertices, the radius of the circle, the fill type, the location, rotation, and the thing that we'll be changing is the number of vertices. So instead of 32, I'll change the number of vertices to 64 in order to give it a slightly more rounded appearance. Now to change its size according to the size of a dial, let's tab into the edit mode, press A to select everything, and we'll scale it down by pressing S. Now left click to finalize, and with this we have the size of this circle similar to that of the watch dial. However, if I press G to move it, then you will notice that it is a simple circle with no faces connecting the vertices of the circle. So to fill a face with all the vertices of the circle, first I'll right click to cancel the movement, press A to select all, and to fill the faces, the shortcut is to press F. With this, all the faces will together get connected in order to fill this face. Now moving ahead, let's turn off the X-ray mode in order to see the objects properly. So press Alt plus Z, and with this circle selected, let's move it up in the Z axis, and we'll place the circle somewhere over here. Now the next thing that we'll do is to make sure that there's no empty space between the pocket watch and the circle face. So for this purpose, you simply need to go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad and turn on the X-ray mode by pressing Alt plus Z. And now if I zoom in, then here we can see that the outlining of the circle is passing beyond this inner boundary of the pocket watch, and this will ensure that the scaling of the circle is perfectly correct for this pocket watch. Now if we look closely at this image, we'll notice that for these gears that are added in the watch, we have some cutouts, and just because of these cutouts, we are able to see them. So in order to create similar cutouts in the circular plate that we have created in our scene, we'll be using a tool which is known as the Boolean modifier. So to understand this, let's return back to the object mode, and now first of all, we'll be focusing only on this circular plate, and so let's hide this body of the pocket watch that we previously created. So with this body selected, press H to hide, and after this, we'll be understanding about the Boolean modifier, and we'll use it to create some cutouts on this circular plate. So for this, we'll first add a cylinder in our scene. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder, press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select all, and we'll scale it down like this. Now left click to finalize, and let's return back to the object mode. Now suppose I want that a cutout should be created on this circular plate depending upon the area of intersection of this circle and the cylinder. So with this circle selected, we have to go to the modify properties, then click on add modifier, and in the generate category, here we have the Boolean modifier. So I'll select this, and in the Boolean, we are having 3 options, but the one which we'll be using for our current purpose will be the difference operation. This operation will basically subtract the geometry or the mesh of a particular object from that object on which the Boolean modifier is used. To understand this thing in more detail, we'll switch to the wireframe mode. So click on this icon, and now with the circle selected, I will go to the modify properties, and in the object, we'll be selecting this cylinder.001 which we have just created. And by doing this, you will notice that there is a slight change in the geometry of the circle. And yes, in order to see this change, do ensure that you have turned on the X-ray mode. Now if I select the cylinder and try to move it, then you will notice that as the position of the cylinder is changing, the circular cutout that is created is also moving. And basically this is the use of the Boolean modifier. With the difference operation selected, it basically subtracts the geometry of the target object which you select here, which is the cylinder.001 in this case, from that object on which this modifier is applied. So now if I go back to the solid mode, then I'll click here and apply the modifier by clicking on the apply button. Then in the 3D view viewport, I'll select the cylinder and press X to delete it, and with this we are having a cutout created according to the area of intersection of the cylinder and the circular object. However, if you want to change the size of this cutout, then select the circle, press tab to go to the edit mode, deselect everything, press 1 for the vertex selection mode, and now we need to select this entire vertex loop, so press Alt and left click. Now the first half is selected, and to select the other half also, we need to hold the Shift key and then simultaneously hold the Alt key. Now left click over here again, and with this we have the entire loop of vertices selected in the edit mode. Now to change their size, simply press S to scale it up or down and left click to finalize. Similarly, if I press G to move it in a particular direction, then you will notice that we can easily change the position. To cancel the movement, click the right mouse button, and now we'll be repeating the same procedure to create some more cutouts. So let's come out of the edit mode, press Shift plus A, go to mesh and select the cylinder, press tab to go to the edit mode, and with all the vertices selected, press S to scale it down. Let's return back to the object mode, and let's also move it slightly up in the Z axis. Now to create the cutouts, we need to have a proper view of the circular plate. So let's go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and with the cylinder selected, I will press G to move it and place it at that particular location where we want to create the cutout. So I'll place it over here. Similarly, to create some more cutouts, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate. Let's place it over here, and similarly, if you want to change the scaling, then tap to go to the edit mode, and with all the vertices selected, press S to scale it up. Now return back to the object mode, and in a similar way, you can create as many duplicates as you want by simply pressing Shift plus D and moving the cylinder at your desired location. So I will place this cylinder over here, then go to the edit mode, and I'll slightly scale it up like this. Now back to the object mode, I will be selecting both of these cylinders and will place them somewhere over here. And yes, it totally depends upon you that on which particular locations you want to create the cutouts. Now to select both of these cylinders, I'll first select any one, and then with the Shift key hold it, left click to select the other one. Now press Shift plus D to create the duplicates, and we'll move them in the Y axis. Let's place them over here. Let's also move them in the X axis like this, and left click to finalize. If you want, you can change their rotation or the scaling according to the size of the cutouts that you wish to have on the circular plate. Now once you have created all the cutouts, we can now work on applying the Boolean modifier. So for this, I'll select the circular plate, then go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the Boolean modifier. Now instead of applying the Boolean modifier to each of these objects separately, we can create a single collection of all these cylindrical objects. So for this, let's first select all these cylinders by holding the Shift button, and after this, to create a collection, the shortcut is to press M and select the new collection. We'll keep the name of this collection as collection number 2, then click on the create button, and after this, in the scene collection, you can see that we have a separate collection named as the collection number 2, where we have added all these cylinders that we need for the cutouts. Now select the circle again, and in the Boolean modifier, change the operand type from object to collection, and in the collection, we'll be selecting the collection number 2. Now to see the cutouts, let's first apply the Boolean modifier from here, then select all the cylinders that we use for the cutouts by holding the Shift button, and after that, press X to delete them. And with this, we have now created some simple cutouts for a pocket watch. And now moving ahead, the next thing that we'll do is to give some thickness to this circular plate. So for this, let's first unhide the cylinder, and the shortcut to do this is to press Alt plus H, and with this we have the cylinder object, or basically the pocket watch body that we created back in our scene. To give some thickness to this circular plate, I'll select it, then press tab to go to the edit mode, press A to select everything, and we'll be applying the extrusion effect. So press E to extrude it downward in the Z axis, and left click to finalize, and by doing this, we have created some visible thickness for this circular plate. Also, if you want to reduce the thickness, then with the extruded vertices selected, press G to move them in the Z axis and reduce the thickness like this. Also, to give it a more natural look, we'll be applying the bevel modifier. So let's come out of the edit mode, and with this circle selected, go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the bevel modifier. Then for the amount, we'll reduce it to something like 0.02 or 0.03. After this, we'll now work on creating these numbers for the pocket watch, and for this purpose, we'll be using an understanding about the text object. So to add a text object, press Shift plus A, and over here we have the option to add the text object. So I'll select this, and now here you can see that we have the text object created, and if you want to modify it, then press tab to go to the edit mode, and now if I type anything on the keyboard, then that particular text will get displayed on this text object. Similarly, if I press backspace, then the text will be removed, and yes, in order to see the text completely, let's return back to the object mode and press Alt plus Z to turn on the X-ray mode. Now to change the text, press tab to enter the edit mode, then press backspace to remove this text. Now in the reference image, the numbers on the watch are in numeric form. However, in most of the watches, we have the numbers written in the Roman numeral system. So in this case also, I will be going with the Roman numeral system, but if you wish, you may proceed with the normal numeral system just like this reference image. Now in the text object, I will enter XII in capitals in order to represent the number 12 in the Roman numeral system. After this, I'll get back to the object mode, and to place it properly on the clock, we'll go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, press Alt plus Z to turn off the X-ray mode, and with the text selected, first we'll scale it down by pressing S. So we'll keep it to something like this, and we'll move it up in the Y-axis. So let's place it over here. Let's also move it slightly in the X-axis like this. Also, one more thing that you can see here is that this number on the clock is intersecting with these empty cutouts that we created. So to prevent this from happening, I'll select the circular plate, press R to rotate it, and left click to finalize. Now the reason why we can't see the text that we just created is that it is placed below this circular plate. However, if you want to view it in the object mode, then press Alt plus Z to turn on the X-ray mode, and now we are able to see the text that we added. So I'll select it, and to move it above the plate, let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad. Let's zoom in, and we'll move this up in the Z axis. So let's place it over here. Also, in order to give it some thickness, we have to go to the object data properties. So with the text selected, go to this properties editor, and over here you have this option which is called the object data properties. So if I click on this, it will display a list of all the options, or basically the settings that are available for the text that we created. For example, the resolution, the alignment, the font, and if I open the geometry, then from here we can control the amount of extrusion which is applied to the text. So to apply the extrusion, let's first turn off the X-ray mode by pressing Alt plus Z, and let's increase the value of extrusion from 0 meters to something around 0.02 or 0.03 meters, and now the text looks perfect. Similarly, if you want to apply the bevel effect, then you can go to the bevel category and increase the depth from here. But for now, I will keep this to 0 meters. Then I'll scroll down, and in the font option, we can change the font of this text. So to do this, click on this folder icon along the regular font, and this will display a list of all the fonts that are saved in your PC. So you can select any of these fonts by simply left clicking on it, and then click on the open font. By doing this, the particular font that you selected will get applied to that particular text object. Moving ahead, we'll now be creating 3 more text objects for the remaining numbering. So let's go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and with this selected, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, then right click to cancel the movement, and we'll move it down in the Y-axis, and let's place it over here. Now to change the text, press tab to go to the edit mode, press backspace to remove, and here I'll be typing VI in order to represent 6 o'clock. Now return back to the object mode. Let's also rotate the circular plate slightly more like this. Now moving ahead, let's create 2 more duplicates. So I'll select this text, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, then right click to cancel the movement. Now press G and Y to move it up in the Y-axis, then press G and X, and we'll place it over here. Let's move it slightly more upwards. Now to change the text, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll change this to 3 o'clock. Now return back to the object mode. Let's create 1 more duplicate by pressing Shift plus D, then right click to cancel the movement, and we'll place it in the X-axis over here. Then to change the text, press tab to go to the edit mode, and for this one, I will be typing IX representing 9 o'clock. And after this, we have created the text objects for these 4 numbers. And now moving ahead, the next thing that we'll be doing is to create this top part of the pocket watch, or basically its crown. So for this, while being in the object mode, we'll be adding a cylinder object. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder, press tab to go to the edit mode, and with all the vertices selected, we'll scale it down like this. Then we'll rotate it in the X-axis by pressing R and X, and if I type 90 in the numpad and press enter, then this will rotate the cylinder object in the X-axis by 90 degrees. Now let's return back to the object mode, and to place it properly on the top of the pocket watch, we'll go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and with the cylinder selected, we'll move it up in the Y-axis and place it over here. Now press tab to go to the edit mode, and let's also scale it up in the Y-axis like this. Now to give it a curved shape in the middle, we need to have some more vertices or edge loops so that we can change their scaling and give this a curved or a rounded look. So for this, simply press Ctrl plus R to insert a loop cut, and to increase the number of loop cuts, we'll be using the scroll wheel. So let's keep the number of loop cuts to somewhere around 8 or 10, then left click to finalize and right click to cancel the movement. Now press A to select everything, and let's slightly scale up more in the Y-axis like this. Then I'll go to the object mode, and we'll move it up in the Y-axis. Now to give it a curved appearance, we'll go to the edit mode, and we need to select only some particular loops of vertices or the edge loops somewhere around the middle region. So for this, let's first deselect everything, and to select this particular edge loop, I'll hold the Alt button and left click on this edge. However, if I try to scale it up, then you will notice that we are not getting the desired results, and this is because we are only scaling up a single edge loop and its influence is not being applied to the remaining ones. And for this particular purpose, we have a special tool in Blender which is known as the proportional editing tool. To enable it, press O, and now if I press S to scale it up, then you will notice that even though we have selected only a particular edge loop, still the entire cylinder is being influenced by the scaling up and down. And to control this area of influence, we need to use our scroll wheel. So if I begin to scroll up, then after some time, this circle will appear, which is also known as the circle of influence, and it basically defines the area where the effect of scaling will be applied within the selected object. And by default, the area of this circle is very high whenever you will use it for the very first time. So after turning it on and pressing S, do ensure that you scroll up the middle mouse button a lot of times in order to reduce its area. And now over here, you can clearly see that the cylinder that we created is now having a curved or a rounded appearance. Moving ahead, I will now select this edge loop by holding Alt and will use it to create this part which is scaled up in the reference image. So for this, press E to extrude, then left click to finalize, and to scale it up, I'll first turn off the proportional editing tool by pressing O, then press S to scale it up and left click to finalize. And so with this, we have created this top part of the pocket watch. But right now, we need to reduce its size. So press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select everything, and press S to scale it down. After that, click the left mouse button to finalize, and to place it properly, let's return back to the object mode. Let's also go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, and we'll move this in the y-axis. So we'll place it over here. Let's also move it slightly downwards like this. And finally, we have completed the basic structure of this top part, the body of the pocket watch, this circular disc with the cutouts, and even some simple text for the time in the watch. And now the next thing that we'll be doing is to create 2 more copies of this top part, and we'll place them on these 2 locations. So to do this, with this object selected, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, then right click to cancel the movement. And now one way to place this object at a specific position is to move it by pressing G and rotating it to make the adjustment. However, a better way to do the same thing is to rotate it around the 3D cursor. So with the duplicate selected, we need to transform the pivot point around which the rotation will occur. So to do this, click on this icon which is for the transform pivot point, and from here select the 3D cursor. After this, if I try to rotate this duplicate by pressing R, then you will notice that it will take the 3D cursor as the reference for the rotation purpose. Now we'll place it over here, and to finalize the rotation, click the left mouse button, and similarly to create one more object for the opposite side, you can create a duplicate of it and rotate it. However, a better and a more accurate way to do the same thing is to use the mirror modifier. To access it, go to the modify properties by clicking on this icon, then click on add modifier, and in the generate, here you have the mirror modifier. Now this particular modifier will allow us to create a mirror object based on a reference object which will be this top part of the pocket watch. It is saved with the name cylinder.001, and therefore with this selected, I'll go to the mirror object, and in this list, I will select the cylinder.001. By doing this step, the mirror modifier will now take this cylinder.001 as the reference object, or basically the mirror object, and it will create the mirrored object of this cylinder.002 in such a way that it will be symmetrical to the original one with reference to the top part. Now the next thing that we'll be doing is to add some gears in these empty spaces, and to do this, we don't need to model the gears ourselves because Blender has a special add-on or an extension which is available for free within the software, and it will allow us to directly add the gear objects. And to get that extension, go to this edit option on the top left corner and click on the preferences. After this, the Blender preferences window will appear. Now click on the get extensions, and in the search bar, simply type extra mesh objects. After this, an extension will appear named as extra mesh objects. Click on the install button, and once it is installed, we'll close this window. Now to add the gears, press Shift plus A, then go to mesh, and here you have a category which is known as the gears. So in this, we'll be selecting the gear, and this will add this gear in our scene, and also this menu will appear using which you can change the different properties of the gear which is added. So in the number of teeth, I'll enter a value of 16. Then in this dedendum, we'll enter a value of somewhere around 0.2 meters, or maybe let's keep it to 0.19 meters, and now it looks perfect. Now press tab to go to the edit mode, press A to select everything, and we'll scale it down like this. Also, to place it properly according to these cutouts, let's go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, zoom in, and to place the gears at different positions, let's return back to the object mode, and with this gear selected, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, then right click to cancel the movement, and we'll place it over here. Then to scale it down, tab to go to the edit mode, and let's scale it down like this. And yes, right now, just like the rotation, the scaling is also being applied by taking the 3D cursor as the reference point. To fix this, go to the transform pivot point menu, and we'll change this back to the median point. Now let's scale it down like this, and left click to finalize. Moving ahead, let's return back to the object mode, press Shift plus D to create another duplicate, and we'll place it over here. Now go to the edit mode, and we'll scale it down. Then once again, we'll go back to the object mode, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and place it over here. Similarly, for this cutout, I'll create one more duplicate and place it over here. To scale it up, press tab to go to the edit mode, and we'll scale it up like this. Moving ahead, we now have to create 3 more duplicates for these circles. And if you remember, these cutouts were almost similar to the ones where we just placed the 3 gears. As a result, I will be selecting all these 3 gears by holding the shift button, and we'll create the duplicates by pressing Shift plus D, and we'll place them over here. Now with the 3 of them selected, go to the edit mode, press A to select everything, and press R to rotate it. After this, left click to finalize. Let's also come out of the edit mode, and now we'll be adjusting the position of each of these gears individually according to the cutouts. Similarly, I'll select this one also and slightly move it like this. Now the next thing that we need to do is to model the hands of the pocket watch and the middle part where the two hands of the clock will intersect. So for that middle part, I will select this top part that we created, then go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, right click to cancel the movement. Now to rotate it, press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select everything, and we'll rotate it in the X axis by 90 degrees. After this, we need to place this on the center region of this pocket watch. So for this, return back to the object mode, and now we'll be using a shortcut which will move this object back to the 3D cursor. And the shortcut to do this is to press Alt plus G. By doing this, we basically reset the position of the selected object back to the place where the 3D cursor is placed. Now press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll slightly scale it down like this. Also, let's scale it up further in the Z axis in order to give it some height. Now to ensure that it is properly placed, we'll return back to the object mode, then go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, and if you want, you can change its position by enabling the X-ray mode and comparing the distance between this circular plate and this object that we'll be using as the middle part. After this, we'll disable the X-ray mode, and let's now work on modeling the hands of the clock. So for this, press Shift plus A, go to mesh, and I will select the plane object. Let's go to the top view, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll scale it down in the X axis. Also, we'll turn on the X-ray mode in order to see everything properly. Now press S and Y to scale it down in order to reduce the length of this hand. Now we'll be using this particular hand as the minute hand of the clock. So while being in the edit mode and with all the vertices selected, I'll move this up in the Y axis and place it over here. Also, let's slightly reduce its scaling in the X axis even more, and now it looks perfect. Then if you want to make the ends of the hand slightly pointing, then for this, press Ctrl plus R to add a loop cut over here, then left click to finalize and right click to cancel the movement. Then I'll select this vertex and we'll move it up in the Y axis like this. And with this, we have created the minute hand of our pocket watch. But if I disable the X-ray mode, then you will notice that the position or the placement of this minute hand is not accurate. As a result, while being in the object mode, I will press G and Z to move it up, and we'll place it over here. Similarly, I'll go to the top view again, and to create the R hand, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, right click to cancel the movement, press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select all, and we'll rotate it like this. However, you can see that it is rotating around the pivot point and not the 3D cursor. To fix this, go to the transform pivot point and select the 3D cursor. Now let's rotate it like this. Now to scale it down, press S and left click to finalize. And so with this, we have created both the hands of the pocket watch. But if I zoom in, then you will notice that the position of these hands is not accurate. So for this, I'll first select this middle part and will slightly move it up in the Z axis. Then I'll select this smaller hand and we'll move it up in the Z axis and place it over here. Also, we'll move these gears that we added for the pocket watch in the upward direction so that they properly align with this circular disc. So to select all of them, go to the scene collection, and in this collection number 2, we have all these gears added, and to select all of them, I'll first select this object with the name gear, then scroll down, and with the shift key holded, I'll select this last object with the name gear.007. This will select all the objects who have their names present between the first and the last object. Now to align them properly, let's go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad. Also, enable the X-ray mode by pressing Alt plus Z, and we'll move them up in the Z axis and place them over here. And so with this, we have the complete model of this pocket watch ready for rendering. Just a single thing that we'll be adding is a circular object which will be used as the glass to cover the pocket watch. So go to the top view, press Shift plus A, go to mesh and select the circle, press tab to enter the edit mode. Let's also turn on the X-ray mode, and we'll scale this circle down like this, and to fill the face, press F. Now to place it properly, let's go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad. Let's zoom in, let's also return back to the object mode, and let's move the circle up in the Z axis. So press G, Z and move it up like this. Let's also disable the X-ray mode. Let's move it slightly more upwards until it has covered all the parts of the pocket watch. And once everything is ready, we'll now work on giving some materials to the different parts of our pocket watch. But before that, I'll select these top parts and right click, apply shade auto smooth. Similarly for this one also, right click and apply shade auto smooth. Now to begin working on the materials, we'll be switching to the rendered view, and by default, the Eevee render engine is turned on in the scene. But to get realistic results, we'll be switching the render engine from Eevee to Cycles. So to do this, click on this icon which is for the render properties, and in the render engine, we'll change this from Eevee to Cycles. Then for a basic lighting, I will select this default light which is placed over here, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate and we'll move it in the x-axis. Now I'll select the circle that we added as the cover of the pocket watch, and to create the glass material, we need to open the material properties which can be accessed by clicking on this icon. Now to create a new material, click on the new button, and over here you will find several options in order to change the way how the material will look. For example, in the base color, you can use this color wheel to define the color of the selected object, but for now we'll be going with the white color. Then in the roughness, I'll reduce this value to 0, and to make it transparent, go to the transmission, and in the weight we'll enter a value of 1, and after this you will notice that the circle that we created is now transparent like glass. Moving ahead, we'll now select the body of the pocket watch, and for this object we'll be creating a material which looks similar to the gold metal, and in order to create such complicated materials, it is recommended to open the shader editor window. So for this, we'll expand the area of the timeline editor and we'll change this to the shader editor. To do this, click on this icon and from here select the shader editor. Now to create a new material, click on this new button. Let's zoom in, and the first thing that we'll change here is the metallic strength. By default, it is set to 0, but since we are making a material which looks similar to the gold metal, we'll change this metallic strength to a much higher value like 0.8 or 0.9, and this will give it a reflecting surface just like a metal. Moving ahead, let's now work on creating the color for the gold metal. So for this purpose, one option is to go to the base color and choose the yellow color from here, but a better option is to use a node which is named as the color ramp node. It will allow us to use a combination of different colors for this particular material. So for this, press Shift plus A with the cursor in the shader editor, then go to converter and select the color ramp. Let's place it over here, and now we have to connect this color ramp to the principal BSDF. So I'll take this color socket by left clicking and we'll drag it into the base color of the principal BSDF. Now to choose the colors, we are having these two pointers in which one of them is black colored and the other one is white colored. In fact, if I select any of the pointers and left click and drag it like this, then you will notice that the pointers will begin to move and the effect of their position will be seen on the color of the material. Now to give it a gold like color, I'll select this pointer which is black in color, and to change the color of this pointer, click here, and in the color wheel, first we need to increase the brightness from here in order to view the colors. So first of all, I will select the yellow color for the first pointer, and then I'll select the second pointer and will change its color from white to the black color by reducing the brightness in order to give it a contrasting look. If you want, you can try to change the position of the different pointers in order to get different results. Also, right now we are not having any kind of texture applied on this object, which basically means that we have a simple material which has a yellowish color and some metallic strength, but to add some texture to it, go to the shader editor, press Shift plus A, then go to texture, and this will display a list of all the textures that are available in Blender, but the most common one is the noise texture which I have selected, and we'll place it over here. Now to see the effect of this texture on this material, we first need to connect it to the color ramp. So take the color socket in the noise texture and connect it to the factor socket in the color ramp, and after doing this, you will notice a slight texture appearing on this gold material. In fact, if you want to change the way how this texture looks, then go to the scaling value, and if I increase it, then you will notice that the scaling of this texture will begin to increase. But for now, I'll keep this value to 5 or 6. Let's also increase the roughness from here, and now the texture looks perfect. In fact, I also think that we should give a greeny texture to this gold material. So go to the scale value in the noise texture, and I'll increase it to a very high number like 100, and with this, we are now having this slight greeny texture applied on the gold material. Moving ahead, we'll now be selecting the circular plate that we created with the cutouts. So I'll go to the scene collection, and from here select the circle, and now we'll be creating a material which looks similar to the wood material. So click on the new button, and to create a wood like texture, we'll be adding the noise texture. So press Shift plus A, go to texture and select noise texture. We'll place it over here. Then for the colors, let's add the color ramp node. So press Shift plus A, go to converter and select the color ramp. We'll place it over here. Now I'll take the color socket in the noise texture and we'll connect it to the factor in the color ramp. Then for the output, I'll take the color socket in the color ramp and we'll connect it to the base color in the principal BSDF. Now to create the wood texture, we need to change the scaling of the noise texture, but this time we have to do it separately in the X, Y and the Z axis. And to do this thing, we'll be adding a vector mapping node. So press Shift plus A, then go to vector and select the mapping node. We'll place it over here, and to connect it to the noise texture, take the vector socket in the mapping node and connect it to the vector in the noise texture. Now to create a texture which resembles the wood, I'll go to the scaling values in the vector mapping node and we'll increase it in the X axis to a very high number like 100. Then in the scale value of the noise texture, I'll input a value of somewhere around 10 or 12. Then in the color ramp, I will select this first pointer, we'll move it over here, and to change its color, click here, slightly increase the brightness, and in the color wheel, we'll be selecting the brown color. Similarly, I'll select the second pointer, let's move it slightly over here, and we'll change its color by reducing the brightness, and for this one, we'll be selecting a mix of yellow and brown color. And finally, this is how the texture that we created, resembling the wood, is now looking on the circular plate. Now moving ahead, we'll be using this same wood material for the top part of the pocket watch. So I'll select this object, and to apply the same material, go to the material properties, click on this icon, and from here we can select any material that we have previously used in this file. So I'll be selecting the material.002, which is the wood material, and it will get applied to the selected object. Similarly, I will select these side objects and will assign the same material.002. Now moving ahead, we'll be working on creating the material for these gear objects. So I'll select any one of them, then go to the material properties, click on the new button, and will increase the metallic strength to a value of 1. Then in the base color, I'll reduce the brightness in order to give it a grey or a silver look. Now to use the same material for all the remaining gears, one option is to select each one individually and then apply the material from here. But a better option is to first select all those gears except the one on which the material is applied. And to do this, I'll go to the scene collection, and you can see that the selected object on which the material is applied is named as gear. So to select the remaining gears, I'll first select this gear.001, then with the shift key hold it, select the last object, which is the gear.007. And now I'll return back to the 3D viewport, and after selecting all the remaining gears, I'll hold the shift button and we'll select the gear on which we have applied the material. So to do this thing, I'll go to the object mode, and first we need to hide the circle that we added for the glass material. So for this, go to the scene collection, and we'll be hiding this circle.001. Now with the shift key hold it, I'll select this gear, and to apply the same material as the last selected one to the remaining gears, the shortcut is to press Ctrl+L, and this link menu will appear where we'll be selecting the link materials. Now to view the result, we'll again go to the render view, and now you can see that the material that we created for this gear is now applied to the remaining gears also. And the reason why everything is appearing a lot more clear as compared to before is that we have hided the circle.001, which was the glass object. But for now, let's unhide this by again clicking on this I button, and now the next thing that we'll be doing is to create a glowing material for the text that we added. So for this, let's scroll down in the scene collection, and I will select this first text. Now to create the glowing material, I'll go to the material properties, click on the new button, let's scroll down, and in the emission, I'll enter the strength of somewhere close to 2, and in the emission color, I'll change this to the light blue color. Now to see the effect of emission in a much better way, we'll be disabling the lights in the scene. So click on this icon, and from here, disable the scene lights, and now you can see the emission or the glowing effect applied to this text object. Also, if you want to change the color of the emission, then you can change it from here and assign any particular color of your choice. But for now, I'll be going with the light blue color. Similarly, I'll select this text.001, and to apply the same material, click on this icon and select the material.004. Similarly, for the text.002, I'll click on this icon, and from here, select the material.004. Then at last, I will select this text.003, then click here in the material properties and select the material.004. Also, if you want, you can go to the emission strength and increase the value from here if you want to add some more glow or emission to this material. Moving ahead, let's again enable the scene lights from here, and now we'll be giving some material to the hands of the clock and this middle part. So for this, let's go to the solid mode. Now I'll select this circle, press H to hide it, and now we'll be selecting this middle object where the hands of the clock are intersecting. Now with this selected, I'll go to the material properties, click on this icon and select the wood material, which is the material.002. Then for the hands, I'll select the minute hand, create a new material, and in this one, I'll again go to the emission, increase the strength to a value of 2, and in the color, I will assign the red color. To see its effect, let's go to the rendered view. Let's also apply the same material to the R hand also. So with this selected, click on this icon and select the material.005. To turn off the scene lights, click here and disable the scene lights. And finally, this is how this pocket watch is looking. Let's also unhide the glass that we added. So press Alt+H to unhide it. Now let's come to the final part of this chapter, which is to finalize this scene and render an image and also create an animation with this pocket watch. So for this, let's first enable the lights of the scene by clicking here and turning on the scene lights. Now let's zoom out, and in order to see how this pocket watch will look in the final render, we need to go to the camera view. So for this, press 0 on the numpad to switch to the camera view, and from this camera angle, we can see that we have to change the rotation of the pocket watch to properly render it. So for this purpose, let's go to the solid mode. Also, turn on the X-ray mode by pressing Alt+Z, and we'll be selecting all the parts of the pocket watch. After this, we'll rotate it in the X-axis by 90 degrees. So press R, X and type 90 and press enter to confirm. Now let's again go to the camera view by pressing 0 on the numpad, and now to adjust the camera properly according to the position of this pocket watch, you need to click on this lock button. This will enable the lock camera to view, and now if I use the middle mouse button by holding it and moving around, then now I can change the camera view easily in the scene. Let's also zoom in slightly. Now let's also turn off the lock camera to view by clicking on this lock button, and now the next thing that we'll do is to create a simple background and the base for this pocket watch. So for this, let's add a plane object in the scene. So press Shift+A, go to mesh and select the plane, press tab to enter the edit mode, and with all the vertices selected, we'll rotate it in the X-axis by 90 degrees. Also, let's scale it up around around 5 to 10 times. Now come out of the edit mode and press G to move it in the y-axis. So let's place it over here. Then for the base, let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad and move the plane up in the z-axis till the base of the plane is close to the base of the pocket watch. After this, we'll turn off the X-ray mode and with the plane selected, press tab to go to the edit mode, and now we need to extrude this particular edge in order to create the base. So press 2 for the edge select mode, then deselect everything, and we'll now be selecting only this bottom edge. To extrude it, press E and Y, and this will create a new face emerging from that edge which will be used as the base. Now let's click to finalize, and let's also go to the camera view to see how the scene looks. Now one more thing that we can improve here is this particular edge which is connecting the background and the bottom face. So right now it is very flat, but in order to make it smooth or basically give it a curved appearance, we'll be using the bevel tool. So press Ctrl plus B, then I'll move my cursor away, and to increase the number of segments, I will use the scroll wheel. So let's keep the number of segments to somewhere around 10 or 12, then left click to finalize, and with this we are now having a curved angle between the background and the base instead of a sharp angle. Also, right click and apply Shade Auto Smooth to make this area smoother. Now let's also work on adjusting the lighting in our scene. So for this, we'll switch to the rendered view, then I'll select both of these lights by holding the shift button, and we'll move them forward in the y-axis. So let's place them over here. To view everything properly, let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, and we'll move these lights down in the z-axis. Also, to bring them closer, I'll first select this light and move it in the x-axis and place it over here. Similarly, I'll select this light. Let's also move it closer to the pocket watch and left click to finalize the position. Now I'll select both of them again and we'll move them down in the z-axis and we'll fix their position over here. Also, to reduce the power of the lights, I'll select one of them, then go to the object data properties, and in the power value, we'll reduce this to 400 watts. Similarly, I'll select this light also and reduce the power to 400 watts. Now to see how everything looks from the camera view, press 0 on the numpad, and so this is how our scene is looking. Moving ahead, let's also give some material to the background and the base. So I'll select this plane object, then go to the material properties, create a new material, and in the base color, I will choose the gray color. So let's reduce the brightness from here in order to get the gray color for the background and the base. Now our scene is almost looking perfect, but one more thing that we can improve here is to add some colored lights in these cutout regions where we have the gears added. And to do this thing, let's first go to the solid mode, then I'll select the circular plate, press H to hide it, and now to create the lights, press Shift plus A, then go to the light and select the point light. To get a better perspective, let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, let's zoom in, and with the light selected, we'll be moving it in these cutout regions. So press G to move it, and we'll be placing the first one over here. And to see how it looks, let's switch to the rendered view, and so this is how the lighting effect is looking. One more thing that we can change here is the power value, so we'll reduce it from 10 watts to 7 watts, and to give it some color, I'll go to this color option and change the color to red for this light. Now to create more lights for the remaining cutout regions, I'll go back to the solid mode, and with this light selected, let's first go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad in order to fix its position. So press Alt plus Z, and we'll slightly move it forward in the y-axis and place it over here. Now for the remaining lights, let's go to the front view again, press Alt plus Z to turn off the X-ray mode, and with this light selected, press Shift plus D, and I'll place this over here in the second cutout. Similarly, let's create one more duplicate, place it over here, press Shift plus D again, and we'll place the next cutout in this region. Now to see how the rendered version will look, let's go to the rendered view, and we are now able to see this red colored glow in these cutout regions. So for these three lights, we'll be having the red color. Then for the middle light, I'll change its color to the green color. Similarly, to create the remaining lights, let's go back to the solid mode, and with this light selected, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and we'll place it over here. And for this one also, the color of the light will be set as the green color. Now let's create one more duplicate. So press Shift plus D and place the light over here, and in the color, I'll change this to the blue color. Now we'll place the same duplicates at the remaining two cutouts also. So press Shift plus D, place it over here, and create one last duplicate, and we'll place it in this cutout region. Now go to the rendered view, and finally this is how this pocket watch is looking from the camera view. Also, in these three bottom gears, the effect of light is a bit low. So to solve this problem, with this light selected, I'll go to the power option and we'll increase the power to 40 watts. Similarly, we'll select the other lights also. So with this one selected, go to the power value and let's increase it to 40 watts. Just like this, I'll select this light over here and we'll increase its value to 40 watts. Now once it is done, we'll be ready to finally render an image of this pocket watch. So to render the image, simply click on this render option and select render image. After that, this window will appear where the image of the pocket watch will begin to render. And over here you can see the number of samples of this rendered image. Higher the number of samples, more will be the time it takes to render the final image. But with that, the quality of the image will also get better. And yes, you can also reduce this value manually in Blender. So let's do this thing. And also, you can see in this image which is getting rendered that the power of blue light is slightly higher. So I'll close this window, then go to the solid mode, and with the light selected in the lower cutout region, I'll reduce the value of power power from 40 watts to something like 15 or 20 watts. Let's do the same with the other lights also. So we'll reduce their power to a value of 15 watts. After this, let's also reduce the number of samples for rendering the image. And to do this, we have to open this render properties by clicking on this icon, and then in the sampling category, we'll be having two options. First is the viewport and the second is the render. So the viewport is basically this region where you create and edit different kinds of objects. And if I go to the render view, then you will see that in this mode also, we have the number of samples which are being rendered. But to save the time and memory, you can reduce the number of maximum samples from 1024 to a value of 128. Similarly, in the render category also, we'll reduce the number of maximum samples from 4096 to 128. And this is because in most of the cases, the sample value equal to 128 works the best for the cycles renders. Finally, to again render the image, go to the render option and select render image. And now this window will again appear where this image of the pocket watch is being rendered. And you can also check the maximum number of samples, which is now set to 128. So it will take some time to complete the render depending upon the configuration of your PC. And once the rendering is done, you can save this image by going to the image menu and click on the save image from here. But for now, I'll close this window and now we'll be creating a simple animation with the hands of the pocket watch. So for this, I'll first select this minute hand, and to animate it, we need to change this window of the shader editor into the timeline editor. To do this, click on this icon and from here, select the timeline editor. Now in this timeline editor, we have these numbers which are basically the frames of an animation. And for those of you who don't know, 1 second of animation can consist of any number of frames, but in general, we normally see the animations of 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. So in this particular case, we'll be creating an animation of 24 frames per second, and to do this thing, first with this minute hand selected, we need to insert a keyframe at the frame number 1. And to insert the keyframe, the shortcut is to press I, and now you will notice that a keyframe is inserted for the selected object at the frame number 1. This will basically store the position, rotation, and the scale value of the minute hand at frame number 1. Now I'll take this pointer to the frame number 60, and suppose I want that the minute hand should complete one rotation in these 60 frames. So to do this, press RY and in the numpad type 360, then press enter to confirm, and also press I to insert a keyframe. Now if I take the pointer back to the frame number 1 and press the spacebar to play the animation, then you will see that we have a simple animation created with the minute hand making a complete rotation. Similarly, I'll now take this pointer to the frame number 120 and will again rotate it in the y-axis by 360 degrees. Press I to insert another keyframe, and now we have this complete animation of the minute hand completing 2 rotations in this pocket watch. Just like this, let's also animate this R hand. So I'll take the pointer back to the frame number 1, then press I to insert a keyframe, then I'll take the pointer to the frame number 60 and we rotate this in the y-axis by 30 degrees. Now press I to insert a keyframe. Now let's again take the pointer back to the frame number 1 and press the spacebar to play the animation. And by doing this, both the minute hand and the R hand were rotating in the animation. Now moving ahead, I'll take the pointer to the frame number 120 and with this R hand selected, let's rotate it in the y-axis by 30 degrees again. Press I to insert a keyframe, and with this, we have a simple animation created with both the hands of the pocket watch rotating like this. Now suppose you want to convert this animation that we created into a video file. So to do this thing, we need to open the output properties, and in this we have various options like the resolution, the frame range, and in the frame range option, I'll change the ending value to 120, and that is because the total length of an animation is of 120 frames. Then scroll down, and in the output options, the file format is selected as a PNG. And if you want to create an animation video, then you have to select this file format, which is FFmpeg video. Also, to save your file at a particular location, click on this folder icon and then choose your desired location from here. After this, to finally render the animation, simply go to the render options and click on the render animation. Then this window will appear where the animation will get rendered frame by frame. And right now, it is rendering the frame number 1, and once all the frames are completely rendered, which might take a lot of time, you can view the animation by opening that location which you saved in the output path. And yes, you can also view this animation that I have created with this pocket watch. And yes, don't forget to share your rendered images of the pocket watch and the animation videos on the Discord server, whose link is available in the description of this video. And so with this, we have now completed the chapter number 1 of the Blender modeling course. Also, if you wish to download the 3D model of this particular pocket watch, then you can join the Patreon of this channel by using the link provided in the description. So in today's chapter, we learned about a variety of modeling tools, some important modifiers, then we also learned to create these text objects, then we assigned some materials to the different parts of the pocket watch, and then in the end, we also added this cool lighting effect in the cutout regions. Then we even created a simple animation with the hands of the clock rotating at different speeds. So I've opened a new Blender file, and the first thing that we're gonna do before modeling a guitar is to get a reference image of the guitar. So I searched on Google for some simple images of some guitars, and it showed all of these results of different kinds of guitars. So it depends upon you that which particular image you wish to choose as the reference image for your project, and after searching for a few images, I found this image of the guitar which I think will be the best to be used as a reference image. So I will download this, and yes, I have also dropped the link of this image in the description of this video so you can download the image from there. So we are back in the scene, and to import that reference image in this Blender file, we need to add an image edit over here. So for this, I'll take my cursor over this end, then right click and select horizontal split. Then I'll move my cursor, and if I left click, then now this window is divided into two separate windows. Now in order to change the lower window into the image editor, simply click on this icon, and from here we'll be selecting the image editor. After this, we simply need to click on the open button and then choose that particular location where you have saved the reference image of the guitar. Then select it and click on the open image. And with this, we have added this reference image of the guitar in the image editor. Moving ahead, we'll now begin with the modeling part, and the object with which we'll be starting the modeling will be a circle. So first of all, press X to delete the cube. Now press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the circle. Now to go to the edit mode, press tab, and by default, there's no face in the circle. We are only having the vertices of the circle connected to each other. So our idea is basically to select these vertices individually and then move them around in order to create this bottom shape of the guitar first. So for this, let's first go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and first of all, we'll be deleting some of these top vertices. So I'll first select them, then press X to delete and select delete vertices. Now I'll select this vertex on the top, and similarly, I'll also select this particular vertex on the other side. Now let's slightly move them up in the Y axis, and to bring them closer, we simply need to scale them down in the X axis. So for this, press S, X, and like this, we'll bring these vertices closer in the X axis. Now we need to have some more vertices in order to form a shape like this, and for this purpose, we'll be using the extrude vertices tool. So in the last chapter, we understood about how the extrusion works for the faces, and in this particular chapter, let's also understand how the same extrusion tool can be used to extrude the vertices. So for this, let's first deselect everything, and now I'll select this particular vertex. Now if I press E to extrude it, then you will notice that we have one more vertex emerging out of the one that we previously selected. In fact, we can do this step multiple number of times in order to create any number of vertices. So whenever you extrude a vertex by pressing E, try to place it in such a position that we are able to create our target shape, which is the bottom part of the guitar model. And now if you want to have the same symmetrical shape for this right side also, then we can use a shortcut instead of again extruding each vertex one by one, and that shortcut is to use the mirror modifier. So first of all, we have to delete all the vertices on the second half. So I've selected all of them, then press X and select delete vertices. Now return back to the object mode, and with this object selected, we'll open the modify properties by clicking on this icon. Then go to add modifier, and in the generate category, here we have the mirror modifier, and since the X axis is selected in the mirror modifier, as a result, we have the same symmetry created on the other side. Also, if I zoom in, then you will notice that this top part is not yet closed, and if I select this particular vertex and press G to move it, then you will notice that it's very difficult to connect both of them together. And to solve this problem, we have the clipping option in the mirror modifier. So if I turn it on from here, and then if I try to move this selected vertex, then you will notice that it will not pass through the Y axis, and instead it will intersect with the top vertex on the other side of the symmetry. Moving ahead, if you want to give a slightly more circular shape to any part of the geometry, then for this, we need to select both the vertices by holding the shift button, then right click and select subdivide. By doing this, we'll have an extra vertex added in the middle of both, and if I try to move it, then you will notice that this will give us a slightly more curved appearance. So if you want, you can try to do this with the other pair of vertices also, but for now, I think that the basic shape for the guitar is completely ready. But right now, we are only having these vertices forming a guitar-like shape. However, in order to convert this into a 3D model, we need to have some faces in it, and to fill the faces, press A to select everything and press F, and this will fill the faces between the selected vertices. Also, to give it some thickness with all the vertices selected, press E and we'll extrude this in the Z axis. Also, to give it an interesting shape, let's add some loop cuts over here. So press Ctrl plus R, then left click, and for the first loop cut, we'll fix its position over here. Now press Ctrl plus R again to add another loop cut, then left click, and for this one, we'll be placing it near the bottom part. Now left click to finalize, and with this, we are having two loop cuts added in this side region. Let's also apply this mirror modifier permanently to this object. So return back to the object mode by pressing the tab key, then go to the mirror modifier, click on this icon and select apply. Now press tab to go to the edit mode again, and now to select the top faces, to apply the inset effect, I'll first select this one, then with the shift key holded, I'll also select the other one. Now to apply the inset faces effect, press I, and if I slightly move my cursor towards the faces, then here where we have the inset effect applied. Similarly, we'll now select these two bottom faces, and to apply the inset faces effect, press I and move the cursor like this. Then left click to finalize, and now we are having this basic structure of the guitar's body ready in Blender. Moving ahead, in order to give it a slightly more realistic look, we'll be applying the subdivision surface modifier. So return back to the object mode, then go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, then in the generate, we'll be selecting the subdivision surface modifier. Then in the levels viewport, I'll increase this to a value of 2, and now you can notice that this guitar is having a much higher realistic and a natural appearance. Also, to give it some smoothness, right click and apply shade auto smooth. Now the next thing that we'll do is to create this top part of the guitar's body, and for this purpose, we'll be using a plane object in the scene. So press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the plane. Now press 7 on the numpad to go to the top view, and yes, do remember that we are using this image in the image editor only as a reference image and not as an exact copy of what we'll model. We'll only be taking some ideas from this image and then add our own creativity to our 3D model. Now returning back to the modeling part, with this plane selected, press tab to go to the edit mode, and we'll scale it down in the x-axis. Also, to see everything properly, let's turn on the X-ray mode by pressing Alt plus Z. Now press 1 for the vertex select mode, and with all the vertices selected, we'll move this up in the y-axis. So let's place it over here, and let's again reduce its scaling in the x-axis like this. Also, for the remaining part on the top, I will select these two vertices and we'll move them up in the y-axis like this. Then press E to extrude it in the y-axis and left click to finalize. Let's again do the same thing. So we'll again extrude it in the y-axis, and we'll take this top part at a slightly more height as compared to the previous one. Now let's scale it up in the x-axis like this. Now go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, press A to select everything, and we'll move this up in the z-axis. So let's place it over here. Then we'll be selecting the vertices over here, and yes, to ensure that both of these vertices are selected, now from the side view, we'll move them down slightly in the z-axis and left click to finalize. Now in order to give it some thickness, if I press A to select all, and if I try to extrude it by pressing E, then you will notice that it is taking the local z-axis into consideration, and as a result, these angles that you can see here are not at perfect 90 degrees. And to solve this problem, we have a tool in the extrusion only, which is known as the extrude faces along normals. And to access it, let's first press Ctrl plus Z to undo the extrusion, then press Alt plus E, and from this menu, select the extrude faces along normals. Now I'll move my cursor in the upward direction, and now you will notice that all the faces will get extruded along their normal directions, which is basically perpendicular or at 90 degrees to the respective faces. And so with this, we are having the basic structure of the guitar neck ready in our scene. Also, with all the top vertices selected, I'll slightly move them down in the z-axis in order to make this a little bit thinner. Then left click to finalize. Now moving ahead, the next thing that we'll be doing is creating these tuning keys on the top of the guitar. So for this, let's first come out of the edit mode. Now press shift plus A, go to mesh and add a plane object. Let's move it in the y-axis and place it over here. Now press tab to go to the edit mode, and we'll scale it down like this. Also, go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and we'll also enable the X-ray mode. Now with all the vertices of this plane selected, we'll first move it in the x-axis and place it over here. Then we'll scale it down slightly, and now you might have seen that in guitars, we usually have the shape of the tuning keys just like in this image. And to create a similar shape in our Blender project also, we'll be using this plane and a cylinder object. So first of all, I will select these two faces and we'll scale them up in the y-axis and left click to finalize. Then I'll select these two faces and we'll slightly move them ahead in the x-axis. Now go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, and to bring them up, let's first select all of them by pressing A, then press G to move them in the z-axis. So let's place them over here. Let's also scale them down slightly like this. After this, to give it some thickness, press E to extrude it in the z-axis and left click to finalize. Now let's again go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and while being in the edit mode, if I press shift plus A, then you will observe that this mesh menu will appear, and suppose I select the cylinder object, then it will get added at the position of the 3D cursor. However, if I go to the scene collection, then you will notice that the name of the cylinder object is not visible, and that is because whenever we add anything in the edit mode of any particular object, then that extra object will also become a part of that object which is being edited. So in this particular case, we were editing this particular plane with the name plane.001, and as a result, this cylinder is now a part of this plane only. Now with the cylinder selected, press G, Y and move it over here. Also, let's scale it down. So press S to scale it down and left click to finalize. Now let's change the angle and let's first move it in the Z axis. So we'll place it over here. Then for the rotation, we'll be rotating it in the Y axis by 90 degrees. So press R, Y and enter 90 in the numpad. Now go to the top view again. Let's scale it down, and to increase its length, press S, X and scale it up like this. Now press G to move it and we'll place it over here. So basically we have to ensure that this cylinder and the plane that we created are connecting with each other. After this, we can now return back to the object mode. So press tab and let's also turn off the X-ray mode, and with this object selected, if I zoom in, then you can see that the placement of the cylinder Blender is still not perfect. So I'll go back to the edit mode and we'll scale this down like this. Let's also scale it up in the x-axis to increase its length. Also, let's move it slightly upwards, and after all the adjustments, the tuning keys will be completely ready. After this, let's again return back to the object mode, and with the tuning keys selected, we'll be applying the bevel modifier to them in order to give them a realistic look. So go to the modifier properties, click on add modifier, then in the generate, select the bevel modifier. Then in the amount, we'll reduce this to a value of 0.07 or 0.05, and if you want, you can also increase the number of segments from here. Then to give it a smooth appearance, right click and apply shade auto smooth. After this, let's now create some more tuning keys to be added on the top. So press 7 on the numpad to go to the top view, and with this one selected, press shift plus D to create a duplicate, and we'll place this over here. Also, we'll be rotating it slightly in the x-axis, but right now, if I try to rotate this tuning key in the x-axis, then you will notice that it is taking this yellow colored point as the origin point. To fix this, simply go to the object menu, and in the set origin, select origin to geometry. And now if I try to rotate it again in the x-axis, then you will notice that we are easily able to rotate this tuning key. Now let's go to the top view again, and now we'll be creating one more tuning key. So press shift plus D to create a duplicate, and we'll place this somewhere over here. Let's also move it in the x-axis like this. Then for the rotation, we'll rotate it in the x-axis in order to give it some random rotation. After doing this, we also need to create the same tuning keys on the other side, and for this we'll be using the mirror modifier. So with this tuning key selected, I'll go to the modifier properties, then click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the mirror modifier. Now in order to ensure that the duplicate tuning key, because of the mirror modifier, is placed at the opposite side of the guitar, we need to make some changes in the mirror modifier. So over here, we have this mirror object option, and in this, we basically have to select this guitar object based on which the symmetry will be determined. And you can see in the scene collection that this top part of the guitar is saved with the name plane. Therefore, I'll select this tuning key, then scroll down, and in the mirror object, I will select the plane. And after this, the mirror modifier will create a duplicate of the tuning key, taking the top of the guitar as the reference object. Similarly, I'll select this tuning key, then go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the mirror modifier. Let's scroll down, and in the mirror object, we'll be selecting the plane. Then in the end, I'll select this tuning key, go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, we'll once again select the mirror modifier. Let's scroll down, and in the mirror object, we'll be selecting the plane. Now you might be thinking that for this particular tuning key, we were having its duplicate created on the opposite side of the guitar even before we added this plane as the mirror object, and this is because the origin point of this particular tuning key is placed on this y-axis. As a result, the mirror modifier will by default take this origin point as the reference, and depending upon this, it will create the symmetrical object on the opposite side. But for the other tuning keys, we were having the origin point placed over here. As a result, the mirror modifier was taking the position of this origin point as the reference, and that's the reason why we were having the duplicate placed over here. But by using the mirror object, we told the mirror modifier to take this plane object or the top of guitar as the reference point. Now we'll work on creating the nut which is placed on this part of the guitar, and for this purpose, I'll select the neck of the guitar, press tab to enter the edit mode, then press 3 for the face select mode, and I'll be selecting this particular face. Now with this face selected, we'll basically make a duplicate of it, and then we'll convert it into a separate object which will then be used to make the nut of the guitar. So to create the duplicate, press shift plus D, then right click to cancel the movement. But right now, this duplicate face that we created is only in the edit mode of this object, which is the neck of the guitar. And to convert this face into a separate object, we have an option which is called the separate option. To use it, press P, and then the separate menu will appear, which will ask you that on which basis it should separate the selected geometry. And since we need to separate the geometry based on selection, so we'll be selecting the selection type. After this, press tab to return to the object mode. Now I'll deselect everything, and then if I go to the scene collection and select this plane at the last, which is plane.004, then you will see that this face that we created as a duplicate is now converted into a separate object. Now to give it some thickness, press tab to enter the edit mode. Now I'll select this face, and we'll be extruding it in the Z axis. So press E to extrude it in the Z axis, and left click to finalize. Let's also reduce its size in the Y axis. So press A to select all, then press S, Y to scale it down in the Y axis. Now left click to finalize, and with this, we now have one more part of the guitar ready, which is called the nut of the guitar. Now the next part that we'll be making will be this bridge of the guitar. So for this also, we'll be using the same method that we did to model this nut of the guitar. So first of all, return back to the object mode, then select the neck of guitar, press tab to enter the edit mode, and with the face selection mode enabled, we'll be selecting this particular face. Now press shift plus D to create a duplicate, then right click to cancel the movement, and to convert this face into a separate object, press P and click on selection. After this, press tab to return back to the object mode, and we'll be selecting this particular object with the name plane.005. Now to convert it into the bridge of guitar, we'll first move it in the Y axis by pressing G and Y, and we'll place it over here. After that, let's go to the top view by by pressing 7 on the numpad. Let's zoom in, and first of all, let's tab into the edit mode, press A to select everything, and we'll extrude it in the y-axis. Also, to scale it up in the x-axis, press A to select all, and press S and X to scale it up in the x-axis. And after doing all these adjustments with the size of this object, the bridge of the guitar will be completely ready. Now let's change the angle, then press 2 for the edge select mode, and I will select this particular edge. Then I'll move it up in the z-axis like this, and we did this because we'll be connecting the strings of the guitar in this expanded region. Now to make the strings of guitar, let's return back to the object mode, then we'll select the neck of the guitar, press tab to enter the edit mode, then press 3 for the face select mode, and we'll be selecting this particular face. Now just like we did for the nut and the bridge, we'll be creating a duplicate of this selected face in order to make the strings of guitar. So press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, then right click to cancel the movement, and to convert it into a separate object, press P and click on selection. After this, return back to the object mode, then deselect everything, and now we'll be selecting this plane.006 in the scene collection. Now press tab to enter the edit mode, then press 2 for the edge select mode, and we'll be selecting this edge over here. Now we'll move it in the y-axis in order to connect it with the bridge of guitar. To see everything properly, let's go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad. Let's zoom in and adjust the view. Now press GY and we'll move it forward, and now you can see that we are having this edge of the plane perfectly connected with the bridge of guitar. Moving ahead, press 3 for the face select mode, then select this top face, and now we'll be adding some loop cuts that we later on convert into the strings of guitar. So to add the loop cuts, I'll first keep my cursor over this face, then press Ctrl plus R. Let's move the cursor slightly, and now to increase the number of loop cuts, we'll be using the scroll wheel. And since we need a total of 6 strings in the guitar, as a result, we'll be adding 4 loop cuts because we already have the 2 side edges. Now left click to finalize and right click to cancel the movement. Now to scale them down, press 3 for the face select mode, then press A to select all, and we'll scale this down in the x-axis. Now left click to finalize. Now if I deselect them and return back to the object mode, then you will see that instead of having the strings, we are having only this face. And to convert it into the strings with the help of these edges, we'll get back to the edit mode, then press Alt plus Z to turn on the X-ray mode, and also press 2 for the edge select mode. And now we have to select these corner edges present on both the sides. So we'll select them on this side, and similarly, let's also select them on the other side with the shift key holded. After this, press X, and in the delete option, select edges. Now if I turn off the X-ray mode and return back to the object mode, then you can see here that we are now having these edges that we'll be using as the strings of the guitar. Also, press tab to enter the edit mode, and let's scale them up so that the strings are connected with the nut on this side. So press A to select all, and we'll slightly scale it up in the y-axis. Now moving ahead, the next thing that we'll be doing is to give some thickness to these strings. But in order to do this, we first have to convert these strings into curves. So for those of you who don't know, in Blender, there are different types of objects. And if I return back to the object mode and press Shift plus A, then all the categories of objects can be seen from this list. The first and the most used is the mesh category, where you have all the mesh objects like the cube, the UV sphere, the cylinder, and then on the second number, we have the curve, where we have the Bezier curve, the circle, the hair and fur. Then we have the text category, about which we also learned in the last chapter of this course. And Blender also gives you the option to convert a mesh object into a curve. And to do this thing, with the string selected in the object mode, right click, then go to convert to, and from this list, select the curves. Now to give them some thickness, we'll go to the object data properties by clicking on this icon, and from here, you can change how the curve looks. So in the geometry, we have several options like the extrusion effect, the bevel effect, and for now, we'll be using the bevel effect in order to give the string some thickness. So in the depth, we'll increase it to a value of somewhere around 0.01 or 0.09, and after this, we'll have the strings of the guitar ready in our scene. Now to finalize the model, we'll be applying the bevel and the subdivision surface modifier to the different parts of the guitar. So first of all, we'll select this neck of the guitar and go to the modify properties, then click on add modifier, and in the generate, we'll be selecting the bevel modifier. Now in the number of segments, we'll increase this to a value of 2, and we'll reduce the amount in order to give it a slightly rounded and a natural appearance. Let's also apply the subdivision surface modifier to it to give it a more natural look. So go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, then in the generate, select the subdivision surface modifier. Let's scroll down, and in the levels viewport, we'll enter the value equal to 2. Now just like this, we'll now select this nut of the guitar, then go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the bevel modifier. Then we'll increase the number of segments to 2, and we'll reduce the amount to a value of around 0.02 meters. Also, let's move it slightly ahead in the y-axis in order to make sure that it is connecting with the strings of guitar. Let's also go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, zoom in, and with the nut selected, we'll move this down in the z-axis. So let's place it over here, and after this, let's also apply the subdivision surface modifier to it. So go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the subdivision surface modifier. Let's scroll down and increase the levels viewport to a value of 2. Then in the end, we'll be selecting this bridge of the guitar, then go to the modify properties, and in the generate category, select the bevel modifier. Now increase the number of segments to a value of 2, and let's also reduce the amount from here. So we'll keep it to a value of 0.02, and after this, let's also apply the subdivision surface modifier to it. And after this, the 3D model of the guitar will be completely ready. And so now it's the time to create some materials for this guitar model. So to do this, let's first go to the material preview mode by clicking on this icon. After this, I'll first select this lower part of the guitar, and to create the material, we'll be adding the shader editor window. So we'll change this window, which is the timeline editor, into the shader editor, and for this, click on this icon, and from this list, we'll be selecting the shader editor. Now to create a new material, click on the new button, let's zoom in, and now we'll be creating a wood-like texture for the guitar body, and for this purpose, we'll be using the noise texture. So press Shift plus A, then go to the texture, and from here, select the noise texture. Let's place it over here. Now connect the factor socket to the base color, and in order to create a wooden texture with some streaks, we'll be using the vector mapping node in the shader editor. By using it, we'll be changing the scale values of the texture in a particular axis. So in the shader editor, press Shift plus A, then go to vector and select the mapping node. We'll place it over here and connect the vector socket in the mapping node to the vector in the noise texture. And after this, we also need to add a texture coordinate node, which will be used as the input for the vector in this mapping node. So press Shift plus A, then go to input, and from here, we'll be selecting the texture coordinate node. Let's place it over here and connect the object socket to the vector. And after this, we'll be able to see the noise texture applied on the object. Now to create the streaks for the wood texture, we have to use the scaling values in the mapping node. So right now, if I try to increase the scale value in the x-axis, then you will notice that we are able to get a texture with some streaks applied on the guitar body. And to make it look like the wood texture, we need to change its color. And for this purpose, we'll be using the color ramp node. So press Shift plus A, then go to converter and select the color ramp. We'll place it in between the noise texture and the principal BSDF. Now with this pointer selected, which is black in color, if I try to move it by left clicking and dragging, then you will see that the amount of black color in the guitar is changing. So this pointer will control the black color in the texture, which is used for creating the streaks, and this white pointer will be used to control the other color, which we can set by clicking here. Now in order to create a wood-like texture, we'll first reduce the brightness of the colors from here, and then we'll change this to the orange color or the brown color. And yes, by changing the color in the color wheel, we are able to see different kind of colors which can be used for the guitar's body. But in this case, I will be choosing this brown color texture since we are able to get a wood-like texture. Also, if you want, you can try to move these pointers in different directions in order to change the amount of color in this wood material. After this, let's also give it a smooth and a shinier look by reducing the roughness value in the principal BSDF to 0.2, and to see how the rendered version will look, we'll go to the render view. So click on this icon, and let's also change the render engine by going to the render properties, and we'll change this from EV to cycles. Now if I zoom out, then you will see that even though the texture is applied properly, but we are getting slight cracks in the geometry around this region. And to fix this, we have to make some changes in the edit mode. So first of all, let's go back to the solid mode, and with the body of guitar selected, press tab, and to see everything properly, we'll disable the real-time display of the subdivision surface modifier, because it will allow us to see the original vertices and the edges of the object without the subdivision effect applied to them. And to do this, just go to the subdivision surface modifier and click on this icon which has the name real-time display. After this, press 1 for the vertex select mode, and we are seeing this error because we applied the inset faces on the top and the bottom side. So to solve this problem, we'll basically delete this particular edge loop which is created because of the inset faces effect. So to do this, press the Alt button and left click over here, then press X to delete and select delete vertices. Similarly, let's also delete the edge loop on this other side also. So by holding the Alt key, we'll select this edge loop, then press X to delete and select delete vertices. Now to fill the face on the top, we'll be selecting this original edge loop present on the top by holding Alt and left clicking over here, and then we'll use the shortcut to fill the face, which is to press F. Now return back to the object mode, and to see how it looks with the subdivision applied, we'll turn on the real-time display. After this, let's also go to the render view, and now you can see that we are no longer having any errors in the geometry of the guitar. Now moving ahead, let's also create some material for the neck of the guitar, and for this purpose, I'll first select this object, and for this one, we'll be creating a material similar to this wood texture but slightly darker. And to do this, let's go to the shader editor, click on this icon, and select this material which we used for the body of guitar. But right now, if I try to do any changes to the selected material, then it will get applied to both the objects. And to solve this problem, we have to create a duplicate of this wood material and then apply the changes to it. And to do this, go to the shader editor and click on this icon. By doing this, the name of the material will change, and now if I do any changes to the material, then they will get applied only to the neck of guitar. Now for the selected object, we'll reduce the brightness of the color in order to make it slightly darker. Then moving ahead, in order to get a realistic look of the material, click on this icon, and in the lighting, turn off the scene world. And now you can see that there's a clear difference between the wood texture that we use for this lower part of the body of the guitar and the one that we used for this object, which is the neck of the guitar. Now let's also create the material for the strings of the guitar. So I'll first select them, then go to the shader editor, click on the new button, and to give them a metallic look, I'll change the metallic value to a higher number like 0.8 or 0.9, and then I'll also reduce the roughness to a much lower number like 0.1 or 0.2. Then for the base color, I'll change this to the gray color. So reduce the brightness from here, and finally this is how the strings of the guitar are looking in our scene. Similarly, let's also create the material for these tuning keys. So I'll select this one, then go to the shader editor and create a new material. After this, in order to give them a metallic look, I'll go to the metallic property and increase this to 0.8 or 0.9, and then in the roughness, we'll enter a value which is very low, for example 0.1 or 0.2. And now if I zoom in, then you can clearly see the difference between the material of this tuning key and the ones without any metallic material. Moving ahead, if you want, you can change the base color to any color of your choice by using the color wheel, and you can also reduce the brightness of the color from here. But for now, I will go with the default values, which is the white as the base color. And to apply the same material to the remaining tuning keys, I'll select one of them, then go to the shader editor, click on this icon, and from here, I will select this last material that we created for the tuning keys. One more thing, if you want to change the name of any material, then you can click here, and if I type any name, then the material will get renamed. Now press enter to confirm, and in this way, you can change the name of any material in the shader editor. For example, if I select the neck of the guitar, then this material will appear with the name material.001, but if I left click over here, then I can change its name like this. Similarly, I'll select the strings of the guitar and change the name from material.002 to strings. And after this, let's also rename the material that we created for the body of guitar. So I'll select it, and in the shader editor, we'll change the name of this material to wood. Now the next thing that we'll do is to create a material for the nut and the bridge object. So first of all, I will select the nut of the guitar, and in this case, we'll be using the same wood texture but with a different color. So go to the shader editor, click on this icon, and from here, I will select the second wood material that we used for the neck of the guitar. Then to make the changes, first click on this icon to create the duplicate of the material. Then in the color ramp, with the second pointer selected, I'll change the color from brown to something like blue or purple. And yes, it totally depends upon you that which color you want to add to any part of the guitar. It might be possible that for your guitar, some other color like green or maybe blue will look better instead of the one that I will select in this case. Now moving ahead, let's apply the same material to the bridge object also. So for this, let's select this bridge, then go to the shader editor, click on this icon, and we'll select the material that we just created. And with this, we have successfully created all the materials for the different parts of this guitar. Now go to the solid mode, and we'll be doing some minor adjustments in the guitar mesh. So first of all, I'll go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad. Let's zoom in, and you can see over here that there's a little space in between the neck, bridge, and the body of the guitar. And to fix this, we'll first select all these parts, including the bridge and the neck of guitar, and also the tuning keys. And if anything is left behind, then you can select that as well by holding the shift button and then select it. After this, let's zoom in, and we have to move this down in the Z axis. So press G, Z, and let's slightly move it down so that it begins to touch the body of guitar. Now left click to finalize. Also, let's apply the shade auto smooth to some parts of the guitar like the bridge. So I'll select it, then right click and apply shade auto smooth. Similarly, let's also apply it to the neck of the guitar. So right click and apply shade auto smooth, and just like this, we'll also apply it to the nut. So I'll select it, then right click and apply shade auto smooth. And with this, our 3D model of a guitar is completely ready. Now press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and to make it ready for rendering, let's add a base and a background. So for this, let's again go to the solid mode. Now to add the base, press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the plane, press tab to go to the edit mode, and we'll scale it up 10 times. After this, press 2 for the edge select mode, and now we'll be selecting this particular edge and we'll extrude it up to form the background. So press E to extrude it in the Z axis and left click. Also, to give this middle part a slightly curved appearance, I'll select this edge. Now press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool, then move the cursor away, and to increase the amount of roundness, I will use the scroll wheel, and this will increase the number of loop cuts. Now left click to finalize, and let's also come out of the edit mode. Now right click and apply shade auto smooth, and let's now place this guitar that we created in such a position that it is inclined to the plane. So for this, let's go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, and we'll be selecting the entire body of the guitar. Also, it might be possible that some other objects like the plane and the light will also get selected along with the guitar model. And to deselect them, simply press the Ctrl button, and if I left click and drag my cursor over that particular object and then release it, then it will get deselected. Similarly, let's also do the same thing with this light, and now we are having only the guitar selected. Now press 3 on the numpad to go to the side view, and also to see the plane, we'll change the mode from solid to the wireframe mode. So click on this icon, and now we are able to see the wireframe display of the plane added. Now with the guitar selected, press R to rotate it like this, then press G to move it and place it over here. Now we'll make some adjustments to make sure that the guitar is inclined with this wall. Also, if you want, you can scale it up and down by pressing S if you want to increase or decrease the size of a guitar model. And once the position of the guitar is fixed, we'll go to the camera view by pressing 0 on the numpad, and let's also change this to the solid mode. Now to adjust the position of camera, click on this icon, and now by using the middle mouse button, we'll be able to change the position of the camera. So let's zoom in and adjust the camera properly, and once it is done, we'll work on the lighting part so that we can finally render the image of the guitar. So let's go to the rendered view, then click here, and let's also turn on the scene world. Let's also deselect everything, and now we need to create some lights in order to finalize our scene. So I'll select this lamp, then press 7 on the numpad to go to the top view. Let's zoom out, and we'll first place it at a position close to the guitar. Now press Shift+D to create a duplicate, and we'll move it in the x-axis. Also, with the light selected, if I click on this icon, which is the object data properties, then from here we can change the color of the lights and also the power of the light. So for the color, I have selected a light shade of purple for this selected light. Let's also select this light, and for this one, I'll change the color to a light shade of pink. Now to see how the image looks, let's go to the camera view again by pressing 0 on the numpad, and with the light selected, I'll reduce its power to 400 watts. Similarly, for this one also, I'll select it and reduce the power to 400 watts. Now go to the top view again, and with this light selected, press Shift+D to create a duplicate, and we'll place it in front of the guitar. Then in the color, we'll change this to the white color, and in the power, we'll enter a value of 800 watts. But because of doing this, the effect of these colored lights that we added has now reduced. So with both of them selected, we'll move them in the y-axis and place them close to the guitar. Now to see how everything looks, let's go to the camera view again, and finally this is how our scene is looking. Now for the background, I'll select this plane, then go to the shader editor, click on the new button, and in the base color, I'll reduce the brightness and we'll change this to the purple color. Let's also increase the roughness value to 0.8, and now our scene is almost ready. The only thing that I can see here that we can still improve is the lighting effect on the guitar because of this specific light. So I'll slightly move it down in the x-axis like this so that we are not having that impact of the white light falling on the guitar. Let's also increase its power from 800 to 1000 watt, and after this, we are now ready to render this image. So click on render and select render image. And now the image of the guitar is being rendered, and you can check the status of rendering from the number of samples which have been rendered out of the total number of samples, which is 4096 by default. And once the image is rendered, you can save it by going to the image menu, and from here you can click on the save button after rendering the image. But for now, I'll close this window, and with this, we have now arrived to the end of the chapter number 2. Today we learned about some new modeling techniques, like first of all, we learned to create a complete mesh just from a single vertex by extruding it. After that, we learned about separating an object in the edit mode. Then we created the strings by converting them into curves, and then we also created some basic materials for this guitar scene. And at last, we made this lighting and the rendering setup in order to render the final image of the guitar. And yes, if you managed to complete this chapter number 2 and even created the 3D model of this guitar, then don't forget to share the rendered images on the Discord server, which you can join by using the link given in the description. Also, if you wish to download this 3D model of the guitar that I created in this chapter, then you can join the Patreon of this channel, whose link is available in the description of this video. So I've opened a new Blender file, and just like the previous 2 chapters, in this one also, our step 1 would be to get some reference images for the radio that we'll model in Blender. So I searched on Google for some good reference images of an old stylized radio, and it showed all these results, and out of these, I think that this one can be used as the reference image for our 3D model. So first of all, we'll download it, and yes, you can download this image by using the link given in the description of this video. After downloading it, I've reopened the Blender project, and to import the image, I'll first take my cursor over here, then right click and select horizontal split. Now I'll take this line to approximately half the area of the properties editor, and now we'll change this particular window to the image editor so that we can import the reference image. So click on this icon, and from here select the image editor. Now to import that image, click on the open button, and now open that particular folder where you have saved the reference image. Now select that image and click on the open button, and with this we are having the reference image of the radio added in the image editor, and so we can now begin with the modeling part. So with the cube selected, press tab to enter the edit mode, and first of all we'll make its shape similar to a radio, and to do this thing we'll simply scale it up in the x-axis like this and left click to finalize. After this, we'll go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad. Let's zoom in, and let's also slightly reduce the size of this cube in the x-axis. After this, if I look at the reference image, then you can see that the corners of the radio are slightly curved, and to achieve this result we'll be using the bevel tool on the corner edges. So first press 2 for the edge select mode, then we'll be selecting all these corner corner edges by holding the shift button, and once all these corner edges are selected, we'll be applying the bevel tool. So press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool, and if I move my cursor away, then this bevel effect will be seen. To make the corners more rounded, we'll use the scroll wheel in order to increase the number of segments. So let's keep the segments to something like 7 or 8, and after this, click the left mouse button to finalize. Now the next thing that I can notice in this reference image of the radio is that the front faces of the radio are extruded inwards, and to achieve such a result, we need to select the front face and then extrude it in. Press 3 for the face select mode, then select the front face, and before extruding, we'll also apply the inset faces effect in order to create a boundary outside the extrusion. So press I and move the cursor towards the cube. Now left click to finalize, and we'll be doing the same step 2 more times. So press I to insert the face, and after left clicking, again repeat the same step. Now the reason why we did this is that we'll be creating a slight extrusion on this face loop that is created in order to give the radio a slightly unique look. But before that, with this front face selected, press E to extrude it backwards, and we won't be keeping it too much deep, so let's keep it to somewhere around here only. And after this, we have to select this outer face loop, and to select it at once, simply hold the Alt key and then click on any of the edges that is present on this face loop. And it might be possible that you won't be able to do it in one go, and if that happens, then simply deselect and try it again on some other edge present in the same face loop. After this, we'll press E to extrude it inwards and left click to finalize. And with this, we are having a basic structure of the radio ready in our scene. To see how it looks in the object mode, press tab, and to get a better view, click on this icon on the top, and from here, we'll turn on the show cavity. This will help us to see the empty spaces of the geometry in a much better way. Moving ahead, the next thing that we'll be creating is the slab-like structure which is separating the speaker and the radio controls. So for this, let's again tab into the edit mode, and now we'll be creating some loop cuts around the radio. So for this, with my cursor over here, I will press Ctrl plus R, and by using the scroll wheel, I'll increase the number of loop cuts to a value of 2. Now left click to finalize and right click to cancel the movement, and to bring them closer and reduce their distance, we'll scale them down in the Z axis. After this, press 3 for the face select mode, and we'll be selecting this particular face. Now press E to extrude it, and with this we have this slab-like structure which will be used to separate the speaker part and the radio controls. Now to adjust the extruded face properly, let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, and with the face selected, we'll move it in the X axis and then left click to finalize. Now the basic geometry of the radio is completely ready, and we only need to create some more details and the other parts like the speaker and some radio controls. And in this particular image of the radio, you can see that there is no digital display of the radio frequencies, but for this particular radio, we'll be having a digital screen which will show the radio frequency. But first of all, we'll work on creating the speaker of the radio. But to create the speaker part, we'll have to create this particular pattern which looks like a metal mesh, or basically the speaker grill. So to do this thing, we first need to select the front face, and now we'll be using the loop cut tool to divide this face into 2 equal parts. But right now, if I enable the X-ray mode and try to add a loop cut by pressing Ctrl plus R, then you will notice that we are not able to add the loop cut on the selected face. And to understand why this problem is occurring, I will right click to cancel the loop cut tool. Let's turn off the X-ray mode, and now we'll be hiding all the other faces of the radio except for the selected one. To do this, we'll first use the tool which is called the invert selection tool, and to use it, simply press Ctrl plus I, and this will invert the selection. Now press H to hide, and with this we are having only this selected face. Now if I press 1 for the vertex select mode, then you can see that because of the bevel tool, this particular face is not having a total of 4 vertices. In fact, the placement of these vertices is also very irregular, and to solve this problem, we'll be converting it into a simple plane with a total of 4 vertices. And to do this thing, let's first deselect everything, and now we'll be selecting only these vertices on the top left corner. And now Blender has a tool which allows you to merge multiple vertices together into a single vertex, and this is called the merge tool. To use it, simply press M, and this merge menu will appear which will ask you that the selected vertices should be merged at which point. For now, if I select at center, then all the vertices will get merged at their center, and we'll be having only a single vertex. Similarly, we'll also be selecting all these vertices on the top right corner, then press M to merge and select at center. Just like this, we'll also select these vertices over here, then press M and select merge at center. And at last, I will also select these vertices over here, then press M and select merge at center. Moreover, we are also having these 2 extra vertices which have been created because of using the loop tool, and to remove them, simply press X to delete and select delete vertices. Now press A to select everything, and to fill the face, press F, and with this we are having a simple face with a total of 4 vertices. Now if I press Ctrl plus R to add a loop cut, then you will notice that we are no longer seeing the problem of not being able to add the loop cut. Now left click and we'll drag it up like this. Also, to see the remaining parts of the radio, press Alt plus H to unhide. Now press 1 on the numpad to go to the front view, and now we have to place this loop cut that we created properly for the speaker. So So press 2 for the edge select mode, then select this edge and we'll move it down in the Z axis. Now left click to finalize, and after this I'll select this face by pressing 3 and we'll extrude it in the backward direction. So press E to extrude it like this and left click to finalize. Let's change the angle, and now you can see that we need to fill the faces on this front side of the slab that we created. So press 2 for the edge select mode, then I'll select these two edges over here and press F to fill the faces. Now press 3 for the face select mode, and we'll be selecting this top face that we'll be using for the speaker part. But to convert it into a speaker, we first need to convert this face into a separate object, and for this we'll be using the separate tool about which we learned in the last chapter of this course. So to separate it, press P and select separate by selection. Now press tab to return back to the object mode, and we'll now select this separated face. Now to make it look like a speaker, we'll be giving it a metal mesh type of structure, and for this purpose we have a modifier in Blender which is known as the wireframe modifier. And to use it, we'll first go to the modifier properties, then click on add modifier, and in the generate select the wireframe modifier present at the last. To see the effect of wireframe modifier in a much better way, we need to have some more vertices in the geometry. So press tab, press A to select all, then right click and select subdivide. Let's do this step one more time, and if I return back and deselect it, then you will notice that what this wireframe modifier does is that it converts a mesh into a wireframe, and it depends upon the number of vertices and the faces that how dense this wireframe will be. In fact, you also have the controls like the thickness and the offset value for the wireframe created, but right now we need to have a very high number of vertices in order to create a texture for the speaker. So I'll select this, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll right click and subdivide it 3 to 4 times. After this, let's return back to the object mode, and now if I deselect it, then you can see that we are having this texture which resembles the mesh metal or the speaker texture. Also, let's reduce the thickness to a value of somewhere around 0.01, and now it looks perfect. Now the next thing that we'll do is to create a digital display for the bottom part, and for this I'll select the radio, then press tab to enter the edit mode, and with the face select mode enabled, we'll select this face at the bottom. Now press shift plus D to create a duplicate and right click to cancel the movement. Let's scale it down like this, and let's also move it downwards in the Z axis. Now we'll be using this face and we'll slightly extrude it in order to create the digital display. But before that, let's also convert it into a separate object. So press P and select selection. Now press tab to return back to the object mode, then deselect everything, and we'll now select this particular face which is now a separate object with the name cube.002. Now press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select all, and we'll now extrude it slightly in the Y axis. After this, we'll return back to the object mode, and now we need to create some controls for the volume and the tuning. So for this, we'll be using the cylinder object. So press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll first rotate it in the X axis by 90 degrees, and let's also scale it down. To view it, let's return back to the object mode, and we'll move it forward in the Y axis. Now to adjust the position and the scaling, we'll go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad. Now press G to move it and place it over here. Let's scale it down slightly and place it properly. Let's also go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, and we'll move it in the Y axis. Let's also turn on the X-ray mode, then we'll move it again in the Y axis and place it over here. After this, let's change the angle, and once all the adjustments are made, we'll press tab to enter the edit mode. Then with the face select mode enabled, I'll select this face. Let's push it slightly inwards by pressing G and Y, and for this rotating part of the control, press I to insert the face, then left click, and we'll extrude it forward like this. Now to make it rounded, let's return back to the object mode, then right click and apply shade auto smooth, and we'll now be applying the bevel modifier. So go to the modifier properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the bevel modifier. Let's reduce the amount from here, and we'll keep it to something like 0.01, and now it looks perfect. Now to create another control on the other side also, we'll be using the mirror modifier. So go to the modifier properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the mirror modifier. Let's scroll down, and in the mirror object, we'll be selecting the cube, which is basically this radio, and with this, we have created almost all the parts of this radio. So we started with this cube that we converted into a radio set, then we made the front part of the radio, the speaker mesh with the help of wireframe modifier, then we created this digital screen and the radio controls. And even though this particular radio in the reference image is not having any antenna, but we'll still be making one for our 3D model. Suppose I want that the position of the antenna should be over here on the top. However, if I press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder to create the antenna, then you will notice that by default every new object gets added at the 3D cursor. But if I delete it by pressing X, and now if I have to move this 3D cursor to a specific position, then simply hold the shift button, and with this, if I right click at any point, then the position of 3D cursor will get changed. And now if I press Shift plus A, then go to Mesh and add a cylinder, then in this case, we are having the cylinder added at this specific location. Now to scale it down, press Tab to enter the edit mode and press S, and we'll scale it down to a very low size because we'll be using it in order to create the radio antenna. Let's zoom in, and this is the scaling of this antenna right now. Also, to increase its length, let's scale it up in the Z axis by pressing S and Z and then move the cursor away. Let's zoom out, and now to reduce its thickness, if I press S, then you will notice that the height of the antenna is also reducing. But suppose you want to make the changes in the scaling only in the X and the Y axis and not the Z axis, and to do this, simply press S, Shift plus Z. By doing this, the scaling will get applied to the remaining two axes except the Z axis. In a similar way, if I right click and then press S to change the scale and press Shift plus X, then in this case, the scaling will change only in the Y and the Z axis and not the X axis. But in this particular case, we want to reduce only the thickness of the antenna. As a result, press S and Shift plus Z to scale it down simultaneously in the X and the Y axis. Then left click to finalize, and this is how this antenna is now looking. Also, let's zoom in over here, and with the face select mode enabled, I'll select this top face and we'll rotate it and then extrude it. So press 1 on the numpad for the front view. Let's zoom in properly, and to rotate the face, press R and rotate it like this. Then to extrude the face, press E to extrude it and left click to finalize. Also, with this top face selected, press S to scale it down in order to reduce the scaling at this particular end. And with this, we are having a simple antenna added for our radio. Also, I'll select the antenna again and let's rotate it in the Z axis like this in order to make sure that the antenna is having a proper rotation. After this, I'll slightly move it up, and let's also tab into the edit mode and I'll slightly scale it up like this. Now return back to the object mode, and finally, the modeling of our radio is completely ready. Moving ahead, we'll now be working on finalizing this scene by giving the radio some materials and adding some lighting in order to render the scene. So for this, let's first go to the material preview mode by clicking on this icon. Now I'll select this radio box and we'll be giving it a wood material similar to the one that you can see in the reference image. And to create the material, we also need to have a shader editor window. So for this, I'll expand the timeline editor, and to convert it into the shader editor, click on this icon, and from here, select the shader editor. Now the default material is added over here, and to convert it into the wood material, we'll be using the noise texture. So press Shift plus A, then go to texture and select the noise texture. Let's place it over here. Now connect the factor socket to the base color in the principal BSDF. Now to control the scaling of the texture, to create the wood streaks, we'll be adding a vector mapping and a texture coordinate node. So press Shift plus A, then go to input and select the texture coordinate node. Let's place it over here. Now again, press Shift plus A, then go to vector and select the mapping node. I'll place this one over here. Now in the texture coordinate node, take the object socket and connect it to the vector, and in the vector mapping node, take the vector socket and connect it to the vector in the noise texture. Now with the scaling value of the mapping node in the X axis, I'll change this to 100, and with this we are having this texture along with the streaks. Now to make it look like wood, we'll be using the color ramp node. So press Shift plus A in the shader editor, then go to converter and select the color ramp. We'll place it over here. Then I'll take the first pointer and move it like this, and similarly I'll take the second pointer and place it over here. Now for the first one, we'll be keeping the color as the black color, but for the second one, we'll be changing the white color to brown. So for this, let's first reduce the brightness from here, and then I'll change the color to something like orange or brown in order to make it look like the wood texture. After this, since we'll be rendering it in the Cycles render engine, so let's also see how it looks in the rendered view. So click on this icon, then in the render properties, change the render engine from Eevee to Cycles, and to get some lighting in the scene, click on this icon and turn off the scene lights and the scene world. And in this way, we are able to get a basic idea of how the texture will look on the radio. Now the next thing that we'll do is to create a separate material for the speaker mesh that we created. So to do this, go to the shader editor, and to remove this material, click on this cross icon. Then click on the new material button, and to give it a metallic look, I'll increase the metallic value to 0.8 and reduce the roughness to 0.2. However, if I zoom in, then you can see that the speaker mesh is having a lot of faces, which makes it difficult to see through it. And if that occurs, then you can press tab to enter the edit mode, and to reduce the number of faces, simply right click and from here select unsubdivide. By doing this, the number of faces will reduce because of the subdivision effect being removed. Now let's get back to the object mode, and now if I deselect it, then we are able to see through the speaker mesh. Also, I can notice here that there's some empty space in between the speaker mesh and the radio set on this right side. So to fix this, let's go to the solid mode, then go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad. Let's zoom in, select the speaker mesh, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll scale it up in the x-axis like this. Now return back to the object mode, and let's again switch to the rendered view. Now moving ahead, we'll be applying the same material that we used for the speaker mesh for the radio antenna as well. So I'll select it, and to use the same material, go to the shader editor, click on this icon, and I'll be selecting this material.001. Moving ahead, ahead, I'll now select this particular control, and for this one, we'll be creating and using the default material. However, in order to add some colored boundaries for these controls, simply press tab to enter the edit mode, and now we first need to bevel the face which is present on the front, so press Ctrl plus B to bevel it, and with this face loop selected, simply go to the material properties by clicking on this icon and create a new material. After this, in order to assign this specific new material that we have now created to all the selected faces, click on the assign button, and let's also switch back to the rendered view. Let's also return back to the object mode, and now in the base color for the material.003 that we're using for the edge loop, I'll change this to the yellow color, and by doing this, you will be seeing a slight yellow lining added on both the controls. Then I'll go to the metallic nature and increase this to 0.8 in order to give it a golden look. Similarly, I'll go to the roughness value and reduce it to 0.2, and now it looks perfect. If you want, you can do the same thing for the other edges also, but before that, it is also suggested to turn off the real-time display of the bevel modifier. So click on this icon to turn off the real-time display. Now press tab to enter the edit mode, and now we'll be selecting this particular face loop. Hold down the Alt key and left click over here, and to use the same material for this face loop also, simply go to the material properties, and with this golden material selected, click on the assign button. Now return back to the object mode, and let's also turn on the real-time display of the bevel modifier. Now go to the rendered view, and finally this is how the controls of the radio are looking in the scene. Also, if you want, you can change this white color to any other color by selecting this material.002 and changing the base color from here. So you can keep it to blue color or pink color or maybe the red color, but for now I'll be selecting the white color. Also, in order to make it slightly more reflecting, I'll reduce the roughness value to 0.1, and now the materials for the controls are completely ready. Moving ahead, let's now work on creating this digital screen, and let's also add some text over it with the lighting effect. So for this, let's first go to the solid mode. Now we'll select this cube which has the name cube.002, and to remove the wood material from it, click on this minus icon, and let's now work on creating a new material. So in the base color, I'll change this to the black color, and to see the results, let's also switch back to the rendered view. Now for the screen, we are having the black color, and to make the screen smoother and more reflecting, let's go to the roughness value in the principal BSDF and reduce this to 0.1 or 0.2, and now it looks perfect. Now coming to the text part, let's first go to the solid mode, and right now if I try to add the text in the 3D viewport, then it will get added at the location of the 3D cursor. And to place this 3D cursor back at the world origin, the shortcut is to press Shift plus C. By doing this, the position of the 3D cursor will return back to the world origin. Now to add the text, press Shift plus A, then select the text from here. Now let's move it in the y-axis and place it over here, and to get the proper rotation, press R and X and type 90 in the numpad and press enter to confirm. Now go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, and let's scale it down, press G to move it, and place it according to the screen that we have added in the radio set. So we'll adjust the scaling and the position to place it properly, and after this, to change the text, press tab and press backspace to remove the default text, and now you can type anything in order to enter the new text, and it totally depends upon you that what you wish to type in the text object here. If you want, you can type a particular radio frequency or maybe a song name, but for now I will be typing the name of my YouTube channel in the text object. After this, return back to the object mode, and let's scale it down like this, press G to move it and place it over here. Now let's also go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, and to move it properly, let's first turn on the X-ray mode by pressing Alt plus Z, then press G to move it in the y-axis, and you can detect the position of the text object with this yellow dot which is the origin point of the text object. So we'll move it in the y-axis like this and place it over here. After that, let's change the view and adjust it properly so that it is very close to the screen that we have created. So let's move it backwards in the y-axis like this, and now to give it some thickness, we'll go to the object data properties by clicking on this icon, then go to the geometry, scroll down, and in the extrude, we'll increase this to a value of 0.09 or 0.1 meters. Also, you can go to the bevel option and increase the depth of bevel if you want to give some beveling effect to the text in your scene. So right now, I have set the bevel value to somewhere around 0.04 or 0.05, and after this, we are now ready to create a glowing material for the text object. So go to the rendered view, click on the new button in the shader editor in order to create a new material. Now to create the glowing effect, we have to use the emission settings in the principal BSDF. Right now, in the emission, the color is set as white, but the emission strength is at the value of 0. However, if I change the strength value to +1, then in this case, there will be a slight emission or glow applied to this text object. In fact, if I go to the emission color and change this to the red color, then you will notice some slight glow of that particular color applied on the text object. In fact, to give it an even better look, we'll set the base color as the same color that we have used as the emission color. So go to the base color in the principal BSDF and change this to the red color. Also, to give it a metallic look, I'll go to the metallic value and increase this to 0.7, and this will give a slight metallic look to the text object. In fact, to increase the amount of reflections, you can go to the roughness value and reduce this to 0.2 0.2 or 0.3, and with this we are having a perfect text with a slight glow effect applied to it. And with this we are now ready to create the final lighting and render this scene. So go to the solid mode, then to add the base, press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the plane. Let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad and move the plane down in the Z axis in such a way that it almost touches the bottom of the radio set. After this, left click to finalize, and to scale it up, press tab to enter the edit mode and we'll scale it up 10 times. Now return back to the object mode, and to give it a basic material, go to the shader editor, click on the new button, and I'll change the base color from white to grey. So reduce the brightness from here, and to see how it looks, let's go to the rendered view, and I think that we should change the base color from grey to purple. Let's also change the brightness. Now for the lighting, let's first turn on the scene lights and the scene world from here, and now we'll be able to see only those lights that we have added in the 3D viewport. By default, we are having this lamp over here which is adding some light in the scene, and apart from this, we can also see some light coming from this text, which is because of the emission color and the strength. Now to add some lighting effect, I'll first select this default lamp, then go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, press G to move it and place it at the back of the radio set. Then for the power, I'll change this to 4000 watt. After this, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and I'll place it on the front side on the left hand corner. Then go to the power value and reduce this to 1000 watts. Then create one more duplicate of the selected light by pressing Shift plus D and move it over here in the x-axis. Now to see how the lighting looks, let's change the angle. Also, I'll select both of these lights and move them down in the z-axis according to the height of the radio set. Now zoom in, and now let's also reduce the power of both the lights in the scene. So I'll select this one, and in the power, let's reduce this from 1000 watt to 400 watts, and similarly, I'll select this one and change the power to 400 watts. Also, apart from these point lights, let's also add a spotlight to be placed above the radio model. So press Shift plus A, then go to light, and from here, select the spotlight. Let's move it up in the z-axis and place it over here. Now in the power, I'll change this to 500 watts, and after this, I'll select this light that we added on the front side, and let's move it ahead in the y-axis like this. Then to change its color, I'll go to the object data properties and change the color to the blue color in order to give a slight shade of blue color on this left hand side. Similarly, I'll select this one, move it slightly forward in the y-axis, and for this one, I'll change the color to the red color. Moving ahead, in order to add some lighting for the side faces of the radio model, let's first go to the solid mode. Now we'll be selecting the spotlight, then go to the front view, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, then right click to cancel the movement, and we'll rotate it in the y-axis by 90 degrees. Press G to move it and place it over here. Similarly, let's create one more duplicate of this light by pressing Shift plus D, move it in the x-axis, place it over here, and to change its rotation so that it points towards the radio set, we simply need to rotate it in the z-axis by 180 degrees. So press R, Z and type 180 in the numpad, and then press enter to confirm. To see how the lighting looks, let's switch to the rendered view, and finally this is how the lighting is looking in our scene. Also, with the spotlight selected, I'll slightly move it ahead in the x-axis, and similarly, I will do the same thing with this light also. So let's place it over here, and finally, to render the image, press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and to change the angle of camera and its position, click on this lock button to turn on the lock camera to view, and let's also switch to the solid mode, and now we'll be setting the position of the camera by using the middle mouse button. And once the position is finalized, let's go back to the rendered view to see how it looks. Now even though the scene is looking almost perfect, but we still need to make some changes in order to make it even better. So the first thing that I can see here that we can improve is to add some more lighting effect on the front side. So press Shift plus A, then go to light and select the point light. Let's move it forward in the y-axis, place it over here, then press 1 on the numpad to go to the front view. Let's zoom in, and we'll change its position and place it over here. Similarly, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and we'll place the duplicate light on the opposite side by moving it in the x-axis, then create one more duplicate, and we'll place it in the region of the speaker mesh. So let's place it over here. Also, if you want to see the light in the scene in a much better way, then you can switch to the solid mode, and now you can see the position of different lights added in our scene. So for the selected light, I'll place it over here and create one more duplicate, place it over here, and let's do the same step one more time. After this, press 3 on the numpad to switch to the side view. Let's select all the lights over here and move them slightly backwards in the y-axis. Similarly, let's also add some point lights on the side regions. So press Shift plus A, then go to light and add the point light. Let's move it up in the z-axis, and we'll place it on this front side. Let's go to the front view, create a duplicate, and move it in the x-axis for the opposite side. Also, it completely depends upon you that what lighting setup you choose depending upon your 3D model of the radio. Now to see the lighting effect, let's switch to the rendered view. Also, I will be deleting the spotlights that we previously added, because now we have added a lot of point lights that are perfectly creating a proper lighting in the scene. So I've deleted both of them. Now press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view. Let's zoom out, and also I'll select the plane, press tab to go to the edit mode, and I'll scale it up 2 times. After this, we'll be reducing these reflections that are falling on the plane by going to the roughness value. In the principal multiple BSDF and increasing it to 0.9 or 0.8, and let's also change the base color from purple to the light blue color. And with this, we are now ready to render the image of this radio that we have modeled in today's chapter. So to render it, do ensure that in the render properties, the Cycles render engine is selected, and in the sampling, go to the render category, reduce the number of maximum samples to 128 or 256, and now we are ready to render the image. So go to the render option and select render image, and now the rendering has started for this 3D model of the radio that we created. And once it is rendered, you can go to the image menu and save the file by clicking on the save button. But for now, I'll close this window, and with this, we have now arrived to the end of the chapter number 3. Today we learned about some new modeling techniques that we first of all used to model the body of the radio set. Then we learned about the wireframe modifier that we used to create the speaker mesh. Then we created the radio controls, applied the bevel modifier to it, and also the mirror modifier. Then we created a simple text object and even added the emission settings to it. Then in the end, we created a simple lighting setup in order to render a final image of the 3D model of this radio. And yes, if you managed to complete this entire chapter and even created a 3D model of a radio, then don't forget to share the rendered image of the radio model on the Discord server, whose link is available in the description of this video. Also, if you wish to download this particular 3D model of the radio for your own Blender projects and also any other model that I have created in this course, then you can join the Patreon of this channel, whose link is there in the description. So I have created a new Blender file, and just like always, the first step to begin modeling anything should be to have some reference images. And since we'll be modeling a camera, so I searched for some camera images on Google, and I have selected this particular image which will be used as the reference image for the camera model. And yes, I have also dropped the link of this reference image of the camera in the description of this video. So after downloading it, we'll return back to the Blender file, and to add the reference image, we need to create an image editor window. So for this, take the cursor over here, then the double-headed arrow will appear. Right click and select horizontal split. After this, I'll take this line to approximately half the area of the properties editor, then left click, and to change this lower window into the image editor, click on this icon, and from here, select the image editor. After this, to import the reference image, click on the open button, then open that particular folder where you have saved the reference image, then left click to select it and click on open image. After this, the reference image will get added in the image editor, and we can now begin with the actual modeling of the camera in Blender. So first of all, to give this cube the basic shape of a camera, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll first scale it up in the y-axis by pressing S and Y and scale it up like this. And to give it some height, we'll scale it up in the z-axis. Let's also increase the scaling in the x-axis like this. After this, if I zoom into the reference image, then you can see that this right part of the camera is slightly more upwards on the top as compared to the left part. And to make such a geometry for this cube, we first need to add a loop cut. So press Ctrl+R to add a loop cut, then left click, and we'll drag it to the specific position. Now left click to finalize, and with this we are having two separate faces on the top of camera. Right now I will select this smaller face, and we have to extrude it in the Z axis. So press E to extrude it and left click to finalize. Now press 2 for the edge select mode, select this edge and we'll move it in the Y axis. Now left click to finalize. Now return back to the object mode, and to give the camera a more rounded or a natural appearance, we'll use the bevel modifier. So go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the bevel modifier. Now in the segment, I'll enter a value of 8, and we'll increase the amount to a value of somewhere around 0.2 meters. Now even though we have applied the bevel modifier on this object, but still it feels like we should increase the amount of roundness around these edges of the camera. And to do this thing, press tab to enter the edit mode, then deselect everything by left clicking in the 3D viewport, and then we'll be selecting all these corner edges. And since we are selecting multiple edges, so also hold down the shift button in order to select all of them at once. Let's select these two also, and to make them rounded, press Ctrl+B to turn on the bevel tool, and if I move my cursor away, then you will notice that some slight roundness is being added to the corner edges. In fact, if I use the scroll wheel to increase the number of segments, then the amount of roundness will further increase. So I'll keep the number of segments to around 7 or 8, and then left click to finalize, and then return back to the object mode. With this, we are having a much better shape for the camera model. Now to make this smooth, simply right click and select Shade Auto Smooth. Now let's work on creating some buttons for the camera. In this reference image, you can notice that we are having some very simple buttons for the camera, which can easily be created just by adding some cylinders and scaling them down. But for our 3D model of the camera, we'll be making the camera buttons a little more detailed, because we use a reference image only to get an idea of the basic geometry of the object which is being modeled. We'll not be copying the exact shape or the structure of the camera given in the reference image. Now coming back to the topic of creating the camera control buttons, let's first add a cylinder in our scene. But to ensure that it gets placed on this top surface, we'll first place our 3D cursor cursor at some point on the top surface. So first of all, we'll be creating one of the buttons at this position where we extruded the face. So to place the 3D cursor at this place, simply hold the shift button and then right click over here, and now we have the position of the 3D cursor changed to this location. Now to add the cylinder, press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder. After this, press tab to enter the edit mode, and first we'll scale it down to reduce its size. Let's also scale it down in the Z axis like this. Now to create the upper part of the control, first deselect everything, then press 3 for the face select mode, select the top face of the cylinder, and first of all, we'll apply the inset faces effect by pressing I and moving the cursor towards the cylinder. Now left click to finalize, and the reason for using the inset faces effect is that we wanted to extrude this face up in the Z axis, but we wanted the upper part of the control to be slightly smaller as compared to the lower part. So by using the inset tool, we created this smaller face which we'll now extrude. So press E to extrude it up in the Z axis and left click to finalize. After this, with the top face selected, press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool, and if I move my cursor away, then you can see that it is already having a particular number of segments which it has taken depending upon the last time we used the bevel tool. And yes, you can also check the number of segments on this top left corner where it shows that the number of segments is equal to 8, and the offset, which is basically the bevel effect which I can change by moving the cursor away and towards the cylinder, also gets displayed along with the number of segments. But for now, I'll keep the number of segments to 8 and the offset value to around 0.12 meters. Now left click to finalize, and with all the edges selected, I'll move them slightly upwards in the Z axis. Then left click to finalize, and let's also scale this down like this. Now return back to the object mode, and with the control selected, we'll move it up in the Z axis like this. Moving ahead, let's also create some more buttons to be placed on the top of camera. So first of all, we'll switch to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. Then with the control selected, we'll create a duplicate by pressing shift plus B, and we'll move it in the Y axis like this. So let's place one of the controls over here, then create one more duplicate, and we'll place it along the first one. So let's place it over here. Now switch to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, or maybe let's go to the side view. Now I'll select both of them and move them down in the Z axis like this. Also, let's change their size. So first of all, I'll select this one, press tab to enter the edit mode, then press A to select all. Now press S to scale it down like this. Now get back to the object mode, go to the side view again, and let's again move it down in the Z axis. After this, let's slightly change its position in the Y axis like this. Similarly, we need one more button like the smaller one to be placed along with it. So for this, I'll select this control and press X to delete it. Then with this one selected, I'll create a duplicate and move it in the Y axis. So let's place this over here, and now we are having 3 different controls on the top of camera. Now in order to give these buttons a natural appearance, we'll be using the bevel modifier. So go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the bevel modifier. After this, I'll go to the segments value and enter 8, and in the amount, I will be using the default value of 0.1 meters. Then right click and select shade auto smooth. Similarly, I'll select this control now, go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the bevel modifier. Then in the number of segments, I'll increase this to a value of 8, then right click and apply shade auto smooth. And at last, I will select this particular control, then go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the bevel modifier. Then in the number of segments, I'll enter 8, then right click and apply shade auto smooth. Also, for those of you who don't know how the bevel modifier works, it does the same operation as the bevel tool in the edit mode. It bevels or adds a rounding appearance to the vertices or the edges, whichever is selected in the bevel modifier. Then the amount is basically the offset, which we also change in the edit mode. For example, if I press Ctrl plus B with all these edges selected and try to move my cursor away, then you will notice that on this top left corner, the offset value is changing, and this offset value is same as the amount value in the bevel modifier. Then we have the number of segments, and in the bevel tool also, you can see that whenever I select a particular edge loop and apply the bevel tool to it, then by using the scroll wheel, I can set a particular number of segments, and a similar function can also be done in the bevel modifier with the help of number of segments. Now moving ahead, let's return back to the object mode, and we'll now create the camera lens. So for this thing, let's first add a cylinder in our scene. So press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder, and right now it is placed at this position because of the placement of 3D cursor. But to get the 3D cursor back on the world origin, simply press shift plus C. With this, we are now having the 3D cursor back at the original position. Now to place the cylinder at the same position as that of the 3D cursor, simply hold down shift plus S, and then this snap menu will appear, where if I take my cursor over the selection to cursor option, then in this case, the position of the cylinder will change from this point to the world origin or the 3D cursor. Now press tab to enter the edit mode. Let's also turn on the X-ray mode, and with all the edges selected, we'll rotate it in the Y axis by 90 degrees. Now to change the scaling, press 3 on the numpad to go to the side view, and we'll scale it up like this. Then left click to finalize. Let's change the angle, and to move it, let's return back to the object mode and also turn off the X-ray mode. Now press G and X and move it like this. Also, let's slightly scale it down in the X-axis. So press tab to enter the edit mode again, and let's scale it down in the X-axis like this. After this, press 3 for the face select mode, select this front face, and now we'll apply the inset tool on this face in order to create some extrusions for the lens object. So press I to inset, then left click, and we'll extrude this face in the X-axis. Now it depends upon you that how many extrusions you want to create for the camera lens. If you want, you can reduce the distance between individual extrusions and have a large number of extrusions, but in this case, we'll be going with only 3 extrusions for the camera lens. Now moving ahead, we'll also extrude this face slightly inwards in order to create the hollow space in the front part of the lens. So for this, let's first apply the inset faces effect by pressing I, then left click, and press E to extrude it inwards like this. After this, I'll again apply the inset faces effect by pressing I and press E to extrude it one more time. And with this, we have now created the basic geometry of the camera lens. To give it a much more natural look, we'll go back to the object mode, and with the camera lens selected, go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the bevel modifier. And now even with the default values, you can see that our camera lens is now having a completely different look than before. Previously, if I press Ctrl plus Z, then the camera lens looked like this, very simple and basic, but now if I redo by pressing Ctrl plus Shift and Z, then it is having a much more natural and a realistic appearance. Now I'll go to the bevel modifier, and in the number of segments, let's increase this to 6 or 8, and let's also reduce the amount from here. So we'll keep this to something like 0.02 or 0.03, and after this, simply right click and apply shade auto smooth. And after all this, we now have the basic body of the camera ready, the camera lens ready, and even some simple controls that we have placed on the top of camera's body. Now moving ahead, let's work on creating some more details for the 3D model of this camera. So first of all, in the reference image, we are having a flashlight, and to create this, we'll first add a plane object. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the plane, then press tab to enter the edit mode. Let's also turn on the X-ray mode, and we rotate this in the Y-axis by 90 degrees. After this, return back to the object mode, turn off the X-ray mode, and let's move it in the Y-axis over here, and along with that, let's also move it forward in the X-axis. So press G, X, and place it over here. After this, press 1 on the numpad, and we'll move it slightly more forward in the X-axis like this, in such a way that it aligns with the front part of the camera. After this, go to the edit mode by pressing the tab key. Let's also turn on the X-ray mode, and we'll extrude this slightly forward in the X-axis. Then left click to finalize, return back to the object mode, and let's also turn off the X-ray mode. Moving ahead, to fix the position of this object, I'll first move it up in the Z-axis and place it over here, then tab into the edit mode, press A to select all, and we'll scale this down in the Z-axis. After this, let's also scale it down in the Y-axis, then go to the object mode, and let's slightly displace it in the Y-axis. After all this, we'll now apply the inset face effect on this front face for the flashlight. So press I for the inset tool, then left click, and we'll extrude this face slightly backwards like this. Let's also scale it down and left click to finalize. After this, we have the flashlight and the holder ready for a camera. To give it a natural look, we'll go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the bevel modifier. Then in the number of segments, let's increase this to a value of 6, and in the amount, we'll be going with the default value of 0.1 meters. Let's now work on one more thing, which is to scale down this middle region of the camera's body. And for this, I'll first select both the lens and the flashlight, press H to hide them, select the camera's body, press tab to enter the edit mode, and now we have to select all these faces in this middle area of the camera's body. So for this, go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, press Alt plus Z to turn on the X-ray mode, and with the face selection mode enabled, we'll select all these faces in the middle. Now to scale them down, we'll basically use the extrude faces along normals. So press Alt plus E, and this extrude menu will appear, from which we'll be selecting the extrude faces along normals. So I'll select this, and if I move my cursor away, then you will notice that the extrusion effect is now being applied to all the faces that we have selected, and since the name of this tool is extrude faces along normals, as a result, all the faces are getting extruded along their respective normals. So once you have adjusted the size of extrusion, simply left click to finalize, and if I return back to the object mode and also unhide the camera lens and the flashlight by pressing Alt plus H, then now you can observe that there's a significant difference in how realistic this 3D model of the camera is now looking. Also, it is suggested to turn on the cavity option in the viewport shading settings that can be accessed by clicking on this icon. Also, back in the 3D viewport, I'll select this flashlight and move it slightly upwards in the Z-axis in order to align it with the upper body of the camera. And right now, I think that there's nothing else that we need to change in this camera model. And so we'll now work on creating some simple materials for this camera. So first of all, I'll select the camera's body, and to create a material, we'll open the material properties editor. So click on this icon icon for the material properties, and by default we have this material added which is white in color. To see how it looks, let's switch to the rendered view. Also, for a better lighting, in the viewport click on this icon, and in the lighting turn off the scene lights and the scene world. And since we'll be rendering the image of this camera in the Cycles render engine, so go to the render properties by clicking here, and in the render engine change this from Eevee to Cycles. After this, with the body of camera selected, we'll again return back to the material properties in order to create a black color material for it. So in the material, I'll first go to the base color, and to make it look black, go to the brightness slider and reduce the brightness. After this, in order to give it a slightly metallic appearance, I'll go to the metallic property and will increase this from 0 to 0.5. Let's also reduce the roughness value, so I'll bring it down to 0.2 or 0.3, and now this camera body is having a black colored material with a slight metallic look. After this, in the reference image, you can see that the middle part of the camera is having a different material, then the upper part is having a different one, and the lower part is again having some other material. So in our camera model also, we'll be using this black color only for the main body which is in the middle, but for the upper and the lower parts, we'll be creating a different material which will be brown in color. So for this, go to the material properties, let's scroll up and create a new material by clicking on the plus button. Then click on the new button, and in order to assign those particular faces of the parts of this object for which we have created this new material, we'll first switch back to the solid mode, then press tab to enter the edit mode, then deselect everything, and to select the top and the bottom faces, let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, press Alt plus Z to turn on the X-ray mode, and I'll now select all these faces on the top. Now to assign this new material that we created to the selected faces, click on the assign button. Similarly, I'll deselect them and will now select these bottom faces. After this, click on the assign button again, and with this, if I go to the rendered preview mode, then now we are having this black colored material only in the middle part of the camera. Now return back to the object mode by pressing tab, and for this new material, we'll be changing the base color to brown. So go to the base color, then reduce the brightness, and then we'll change this to the brown color. Let's reduce the brightness even further in order to make the brown color even darker. After this, we'll increase the metallic value from 0 to somewhere around 0.4 or 0.5 in order to give this a reflecting surface. Let's also reduce the roughness value down to 0.3 or 0.2, and with this, the camera body is now having two separate materials. One of them is the black color in the middle, and the other one is the brown color on the top and the bottom. Also, if you want, you can create another material for the bottom part just like the one in the image, but for now, we'll be going with this brown material only for both the top and the bottom part. After this, let's now create the camera lens material. So I'll select the lens of camera, then go to the material properties, click on the new button, and in the base color, we'll be selecting the black color. Then in the metallic nature, I'll keep the value to the default 0 and even the roughness to its default value of 0.5. Then to create a transparent material for the front face of the camera lens, press tab to enter the edit mode, select the front face, then in the material properties, click on the plus icon, new material, and to assign the specific material to the selected face, click on the assign button. After this, in order to make this face transparent, go to the material properties, scroll down, and over here you have a section named as the transmission. In this, we have the weight option, and this basically controls the amount of transmission, or in simple words, how much transparent the material for an object will be. So in the weight, if I enter a value of 0.8 or 0.9, then this will make the front face of the camera lens transparent. After this, let's now create this metallic lining which you can see in the reference image around the lens of camera. So for this, let's first create a new material by clicking on the new button, then go to the solid mode, and with the camera lens selected, press tab to enter the edit mode, then deselect everything, and we'll now select all these faces which are here on the outer edge of the camera lens. So to select them, press the Alt key, then left click here, and with this particular face loop will get selected. However, it might be possible that if you hold the Alt button and left click here, then some other face loop will also get selected. And the reason behind this is that the selected face loop will depend on the position of your cursor when you left click on the loop. For example, if I hold the Alt button and left click on this particular edge over here, then you will notice that it will always select the required face loop, and this is because by keeping the cursor over this edge while selecting the face loop, we are telling Blender that we want to select the entire loop of faces in the pattern of the selected edge. You can see here that this selected edge is placed in such a way that the next one in the series will be over here, then the next one will be over here, and it goes on throughout the face loop. As a result, by holding the Alt button, if I left click on any of these edges, then the entire face loop will get selected. Similarly, to select multiple face loops, we have to hold down both Shift and Alt and then left click to select that particular face loop. Similarly, let's select this one also, and after this, in the material properties, I'll select this new material that we created and click on the assign button, then return back to the object mode, and let's now switch to the rendered view. Now to make this white color on these outer edges look metallic, we'll go to the material properties, and in the metallic value, I'll enter 0.8 or 0.9, and in the roughness, we'll bring this down to 0.2 or 0.3, and now this material is having a metallic look. After this, we'll be using the same material, which is material.004 for these camera buttons. So I'll select this one, and to apply the same material, click on this icon and select that specific material. After this, let's repeat the same procedure for this control also. So I'll select this material from here, and at last I'll select this control and repeat the same procedure for this one as well. Now at last I'll select this flashlight, and first of all I will assign this the same material that we used for the camera's body, but for the flashlight in the middle we'll create a new material. So go to the material properties, click on the plus icon, create a new material, and to assign this material to a particular face, press tab to enter the edit mode, deselect everything, and we'll now select this face in the middle. Now I'll select that new material and click on the assign button. After this, return back to the object mode, and since this will be the flashlight, as a result we'll be using the emission settings in the material properties. So in the emission strength, we'll enter a value of 1, and in the emission color, I'll change this to slightly yellow, and with this the body of a camera looks almost perfect. And so in the end, let's now work on the lighting and the rendering part. So go to the solid mode, press A to select all, then to deselect the camera and the light, hold down the control button and deselect both of them. Now we'll move the camera up in the Z axis like this and place it over here. After this, we'll be adding a plane below the camera. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the plane, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll scale it up 10 times. After this, while being in the object mode, I'll bring it down slightly and left click to finalize. Now press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and to change the view, click on this icon, let's zoom out and use the middle mouse button to change the camera view. After this, with the plane selected, we'll again scale it up. So press tab to enter the edit mode again and scale it up like this. Then while being in the edit mode, press 2 for the edge select mode, select this edge at the back and we'll extrude it up in the Z axis. Then left click to finalize, and then to make the back part slightly more curved, I'll select this edge, press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool, and if I move my cursor away and use the middle mouse button to increase the number of segments, then we are now having a curved appearance. Also, I'll scale this up in the Y axis like this to make sure that the plane is covering the entire camera view. Now return back to the object mode, and to make this part smooth at the back of the plane, right click and select Shade Auto Smooth. Let's also turn off the lock camera to view by clicking on this icon, and we'll now switch back to the rendered view. Now with the plane selected, click here to create a new material, and in the base color, I'll first reduce the brightness and then I'll change this color to the blue color. Let's slightly increase the brightness, and after this, let's now work on the lighting part. To see how our scene will look in the final render, click on this icon and turn on the scene lights and the scene world. After this, go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and with this lamp selected, we'll move it forward and place it over here. Then create a duplicate of it by pressing Shift plus D, and we'll move it in the Y axis and place it over here. Then for some more lights, I'll select both of them, create their duplicate and move them in the X axis like this. Let's do this thing one more time. So press Shift plus D, move it in the X axis and place the lights over here. Now press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and we are now having a very basic lighting setup for this camera. To make it even better, let's first switch to the solid mode, and now I'll select this light, go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, or maybe press Ctrl plus 3 for the other side, and with the lamp selected, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate and we'll place it in front of the camera. Then in the power, I'll reduce this to 400 watts, and just like this, I'll create one more duplicate of this light and we'll move it in the Y axis over here. Now let's change the angle, and to see how it looks, let's go to the rendered preview mode, and we are now having slightly better lighting for this camera. But to make it even more perfect, with the light selected, I'll create a duplicate by pressing Shift plus D, move it up in the Z axis, let's also move it in the Y axis and place it over here. After this, I will select these 3 lights on the left hand side and will move them in the Y axis like this. Similarly, I'll select these 3 now and move them slightly away from the camera in the Y axis. Now to create some colorful lighting effects, I'll select one of the lights, create a duplicate, move it in the Y axis like this. Then in the color, I'll change this to the blue color. Similarly for the other side, I'll select this light, create a duplicate, move it in the Y axis, and in the color, I'll change this one to the pink color. Now to see how it looks, let's go to the rendered preview mode, and the reason why we are not able to see a lot of influence of the colored lights is that we have added these 2 lights with the white color. So I'll delete both of them by pressing X, and let's also bring the 2 colored lights closer in the Y axis in order to create a slight lighting effect. So let's move them in the Y axis like this. Then in the end, I'll select this light over here, move it slightly upwards, and to increase its power, I'll go to the object data properties and increase this back to 1000 watt. Now let's see how it looks, and finally this is how the camera is looking in our scene. Now let's change the camera view. So click here and we'll change this to the perfect view in order to render the final image. After this, I'll also change the color of this background. So I'll select this plane, go to the base color, and I'll change the color to slightly more dark blue, and now it looks perfect. Now to render the image, click on the render button and select render image. Then in a new window, the rendering will start. Here we can see this camera being rendered along with the materials that we created. For now, I'll close this window, and with this, we have now arrived to the end of this chapter. Today we learned about the modeling of this camera, and along with that, we even discussed about some new modeling techniques that we used while while modeling the various parts of the camera like its main body, the camera lens, the controls of camera, flashlight, and in the end we even created a simple lighting effect in order to render the image of this camera. And yes, if you manage to complete this entire chapter and even create a final render of the camera, then do share the results on the Discord server whose link is available in the description of this video. Apart from this, if you want to download the 3D model of this camera that I have modeled in this chapter, then you can join the Patreon whose link is available in the description of this video. Open this new Blender file with the default layout, and the first step that we'll do is to add some reference images in order to create the model of the leather couch. So I searched on Google for some good reference images for leather couch, and all these results came up. Out of these, I think that this one looks perfect, and so I'll be downloading this image as the reference image. Also, I've dropped the link of this image in the description of this video, so you too can download it by using that link. So we are back in the scene, and to add the reference image in the Blender file, we first need to add an image editor here. So I'll take my cursor over here, and this double-headed arrow will appear. Then right click and select horizontal split. After this, I'll take this pointer somewhere in the middle and will left click to divide this editor into two parts. Then click here and select the image editor. Now to import that image to be used as the reference image, click on the open button. Then this window will appear where you have to open that particular folder where you saved the reference image. After this, select that image, click on the open button, and now we have this reference image of the leather couch added over here. Now coming to the modeling part, the modeling of this leather couch will be a slight different as compared to the previous 4 3D models that we have made in this course. Till now, we use simple mesh shapes like cube, plane, cylinder, and use them to create a variety of different things, and that too without using any physics and simulation. But in Blender, you have the option to use physics and simulation, and to access this, simply scroll down, and over here you have a properties editor named as the physics properties editor. In this, we have various types of physics simulations like fluid, soft body, rigid body, cloth, collision, etc. And by using this physics and simulation, we can create a lot of amazing things in Blender. For example, right now we are working on a leather couch, and as a result, we'll be using the cloth simulation in order to create the different parts of this leather couch. But before that, we need to modify the shape of this cube on which we'll apply the cloth physics in order to make it ready to create one of these cushions for the bottom part. So to do this, let's first tab into the edit mode, and with all the vertices selected, I'll scale this down in the z-axis and left click to finalize. After this, we'll scale it up in the x-axis, and similarly, let's also scale it up slightly in the y-axis. Now while using any type of physics and simulation, it is suggested to have a high number of vertices in order to give it a realistic look. So to increase the number of vertices in this object, I'll press Ctrl plus R for the loop cut tool, then use the scroll wheel to increase the number of cuts to somewhere around 8 or 10, then left click to finalize and right click to cancel the movement. Similarly, let's also add some loop cuts on this part also. So press Ctrl plus R again, then use the scroll wheel to increase the number of loop cuts to around 8 or 10, then left click and right click to cancel the movement. Also, let's add one more loop cut over here. So press Ctrl plus R, then left click to finalize and right click to cancel the movement. Now return back to the object mode, and with this cube selected, we'll be applying the cloth physics. So in the physics properties, click on the cloth physics, and by doing this, you will have several options, but for now, the one that we have to look for is the pressure. So I'll turn it on, and in the pressure value, we'll increase this to something like 2 or 3, then scroll down, and yes, by default, on applying the cloth physics to any object, it will begin to fall in the downward direction on playing the animation because of the gravity effect. But to prevent it from doing so, simply go to the field weights, and in this menu, change the value of gravity to 0. And now if I go to the 3D viewport and press the spacebar, then you can see that the cloth physics is working and a cube will change into a simple pillow-like structure, and this is because of the cloth physics. See, this is the main point of this chapter that you should be understanding with complete focus. First of all, we used a cube object, then we increased its number of vertices because we needed to apply the cloth physics. Then in these settings, we enabled the pressure because we wanted our cube to convert into a pillow or a cushion-like object. So by using the pressure, we were able to apply a uniform pressure to the object or the mesh, and on playing the animation, we saw a simple simulation of the cloth physics where our cube turned into a pillow-like structure. But to make the leather couch or a sofa, we need the shape of this object to be more like a cushion as compared to a pillow, and to achieve that result, we need to move the frames in the timeline editor, and in most of the cases, it is possible that somewhere around frame number 2, you will notice that your object will actually look like a cushion only if it had a better geometry. So I've set the pointer to the frame number 2, and with this we'll now be applying the subdivision surface modifier to increase the number of vertices and to give it a realistic look. So go to the modifier properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate select the subdivision surface modifier. Then in the levels viewport I'll set the value to 2, and with this we are having a simple object which looks like a cushion. Now since we'll be creating the duplicates of this cushion, to make the rest of the couch we should first apply the cloth physics and the subdivision surface modifier. So click here and click on the apply button. Similarly for this modifier also click here and select apply. Now to create the rest of the couch, let's go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, create a duplicate of this by pressing shift plus B, and we'll move it in the x-axis. So let's place it over here, create one more duplicate and move it in the x-axis over here, and with this we are having the base of the couch completely ready. After this let's work on creating this bottom part of the leather couch. So for this I'll first select this cube in the middle. Let's also go to the front view and we'll create a duplicate of it and we'll move it down in the z-axis. Now press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select all, and let's slightly scale it down in the z-axis. Also let's move it up slightly like this, and let's return back to the edit mode, and now we need to expand its area to cover the entire base. So for this turn on the X-ray mode and we'll be selecting all these vertices over here, then press G to move them in the x-axis and let's place them here. Similarly for this side also I'll select all these vertices and we'll move them in the x-axis like this and left click to finalize. Now return back to the object mode and let's also turn off the X-ray mode. With this the bottom part is ready and even the 3 cushions placed on it are completely ready. Now to create the back part of the leather couch, we'll select all these 3 objects, create their duplicates by pressing shift plus D, then right click to cancel the movement, and we'll rotate them in the x-axis by 90 degrees. Now go to the side view, press G to move them and place them over here. Also to reduce their scaling in the y-axis, press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select all, and let's scale them down in the y-axis like this, and now they look perfect. After this let's place them properly. Let's also move them down in the z-axis like this, and now let's also increase their scaling in the z-axis and left click to finalize. Now return back to the object mode again, go to the side view, press G to move them up in the z-axis like this, and now they look perfect. After this let's also work on creating the side handles for the couch. So with this object selected, I'll create a duplicate, then right click to cancel the movement. Let's rotate it in the y-axis by 90 degrees and we'll place it on this side. To adjust it properly, press tab to enter the edit mode, press A to select all, and we'll scale it down in the z-axis like this, and now let's also move it down in the z-axis. And with this the handle on this side is almost ready. If you want you can scale it down in the x-axis like this, which will give it a slightly better look. After this I'll go to the top view, and with this object selected I'll create a duplicate and move it in the x-axis and place it over here. And finally we have completed the entire body of the leather couch. If you feel like adjusting any of these objects, you can do that by selecting that particular object and moving it or rotating it or scaling it up and down. And once everything is ready, we'll be creating the legs of the leather couch or the sofa. So for this let's add a cylinder. So press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select a cylinder. Let's go to the front view, press G to move it and place it over here. Press tab to enter the edit mode, and with all the vertices selected we'll scale it down like this. Now return back to the object mode, press G to move it up and place it over here. Then go to the side view, let's also move it in the y-axis like this, and to give it some detailing go to the edit mode, adjust the scaling properly, and after this enable the X-ray mode, select the bottom vertices, press G to move them down in the z-axis, and to add some detailing I'll simply extrude the vertices downwards, press S to scale them up and extrude them again. With this we are having a very basic structure of the couch legs ready for our scene. Now right click and apply shade auto smooth. After this let's create a duplicate and we'll move it in the y-axis like this. Similarly I'll select both of them, we'll create the duplicates and we'll move them in the x-axis, and with this we have created this 3D model of a leather couch or a sofa with the help of cloth physics. Now moving ahead, I will select all of these cubes, then right click and apply shade auto smooth. Now the next thing that we'll do is to add some detailing to these objects that we have added at the back of the couch, and for this we'll be using a tool in the sculpt mode. Now to access the sculpt mode, hold on Ctrl plus tab and take the cursor to the sculpt mode. Now this tool menu will change, and since we'll be adding some detail to the cloth, so we need to enable the cloth tool from this tool menu. So scroll down, and over here we have this cloth menu whose icon is also in the shape of a cloth. So left click to select it, and with this enabled, if I try to left click and drag on the selected object, then you will notice some slight detailing being added on the surface of the cloth. To see this in a better way, I'll zoom in and will continuously left click and drag the cursor away, or else you can go to the strength value here and increase this to 1, and now if I left click and drag the cursor, then the effect will be seen in a much better way. You can use this tool in the sculpt mode in order to create some detailing for any cloth object. Similarly, let's also do the same for the other objects. So we'll return back to the object mode by holding Ctrl plus tab and taking the cursor to the object mode, then select the other one, go to the sculpt mode again, and with the cloth tool enabled, I left click and drag the cursor like this. So it totally depends upon you that how much detailing you want to add to the object, and you can even control the strength of the tool and its radius. Similarly, let's do the same thing for this one also. So I'll select it, hold on Ctrl plus tab to go to the sculpt mode, and now we'll add some detailing to it. And after all this is done, we'll return back to the object mode, and now we'll work on applying a very basic material to all these objects. So go to the rendered view, and to get some lighting, click here and turn off the scene lights and the scene world. Now with this object selected, go to the material properties, and by default this material is added over here. So in the base color, I'll change this to something like yellow or maybe brown color, but if you want, you can set any other color of your choice for this leather couch or the sofa. Then the next thing that we'll do is to create a metallic material for the couch legs. So I'll select this one, go to the material properties, click on the new button, and in the base color, I'll reduce the brightness to make it look like the black metal. Then in the metallic nature, I'll increase the value to 0.7 or 0.8, and in the roughness, we'll reduce this value to 0.2. Now let's apply the same material to all the other legs. So click on this icon and select that specific material. Similarly, let's do the same for this one also, and at last, we'll repeat the same procedure for this one. Now to complete the scene for the final render, we'll be adding a plane for the base. So press Shift plus A, then go to Mesh and select the plane. Let's move it down in the Z axis like this, and left click to finalize. Now press Tab to enter the edit mode. Let's scale it up 20 times, and after this, let's change the angle, and let's also apply a basic material to this plane. So go to the material properties, click on the new button, and in the base color, we'll change this to dark blue. Now let's also change the render engine from Eevee to cycles. So go to the render properties, then in the render engine, select the cycles. And finally, this is how our scene is looking in the cycles render engine. Now to work on the lighting, click here and turn on the scene lights and the scene world. After this, let's go to the object mode. Now press 7 on the numpad to go to the top view, and to create the lighting system, I'll select this light, then I will move it and place it on the front side. Press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, move it in the X axis and place it over here. Let's create one more duplicate and place it over here, and then in the end, I'll select all these 3 lights and will create their duplicates and will move them in the Y axis. These lights will be used for lighting up the back part of the couch. Now let's switch back to the rendered view, press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and finally this is how our scene is looking. A few things that we can work on is to add some lighting for this bottom part. So for this, we'll be selecting the 3 lights present on the front side. So with the Shift key holded, select the 3 lights, then we'll create the duplicates by pressing Shift plus D, and we'll move them down in the Z axis. Also, let's move them slightly away in the Y axis like this, and now let's get back to the rendered view. And with this, the simple scene of the leather couch with some lighting is completely ready. If you want, you can make some changes by adjusting the lighting in order to give the render a much more natural look. Also, let's change the camera angle. So click on this icon to enable the lock camera to view, and now we'll change the camera view as per the best angle. Now to render the image, click on the render button and select render image, and then this window will open where we have this image of the leather couch being rendered. For now, I'll close this window, and with this, we have now arrived to the end of this chapter. Today we learned about the usage of cloth physics in order to create pillows and cushions, and by using that knowledge, we also created the 3D model of a leather couch. Then we gave it a simple material and even worked on the basic lighting setup. And yes, if you manage to create this 3D model of the leather couch or the sofa, then don't forget to share the final results on the Discord server, whose link is added in the description of this video. Also, if you wish to download this particular 3D model that I have created in this Blender project, then you can join the Patreon, whose link is available in the description. Now to begin with, our first step will be to have a reference image in order to create the 3D model of a treasure chest. And for this purpose, I did a Google search for some good reference images of a treasure chest and got all these image results. Out of these, I think that this one will be a good reference image for the treasure chest. So I'll download this, and also I've dropped the link of this image in the description of this video. So if you want, you can download the image by using that link. Now we are back in Blender, and to use that image as the reference image, we first need to add an image editor window. So for this, I'll keep my cursor over here, then right click and select horizontal split. After this, I'll take this line to the middle and then left click in order to create a new window. After this, click here and select the image editor. Now to open that image, click on the open button, open that particular folder where you saved the reference image, then select it and click on open image. After this, the reference image will get added in the image editor. Now coming to the modeling part, we'll first make the upper body of the treasure chest, which if you look closely is semi-cylindrical in shape. As a result, I will first of all remove this cube cube by pressing X, and then we'll add a cylinder object. So press Shift plus A, then go to Mesh and select Cylinder. Now to create a semi-cylinder for the top part, press Tab to enter the edit mode. Then we'll rotate this in the X-axis by 90 degrees, and after this go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, then turn on the X-ray mode by pressing Alt plus Z, and we'll be selecting all these vertices in the lower half. After this, press X to delete and select delete vertices. With this, we are having only the upper half of the cylinder. Now press A to select all, and we'll slightly scale it up in the Y-axis like this. We'll be working on creating the lower body of the treasure chest. So for this, press 3 on the numpad to go to the side view, enable the X-ray mode, and we'll be selecting these two vertices present at the bottom. Now press E to extrude them downwards in the Z-axis, and then left click to finalize. After this, let's also join these selected vertices at the bottom together into a single face. And for this purpose, we need to press F on the keyboard, which is the shortcut to fill the faces. Now let's do the similar thing on the sides also. So we'll select these 4 vertices over here, and to fill the face, press F. Similarly, let's do the same thing on this side also. So with the Shift key holded, I'll select these 4 vertices and press F to fill the face. Then for the upper part, we need to select this entire loop of vertices together, and to do this, hold down the Alt button and then left click over here. Now press F to fill the face, and in a similar way, I'll select this vertex loop and press F to fill the face. Now let's work on creating this metallic cage, which you can see in the reference image. But for that, we need to have some loop cuts in order to select those particular faces that are to be used for creating the metal cage. So first of all, let's add some loop cuts for the front cage. So for this, press Ctrl plus R to add a loop cut, and by using the scroll wheel, I'll increase the number of loop cuts to 3. Then left click to finalize and right click to cancel the movement. After this, I'll deselect everything, and now to give them some thickness, we need to select the individual vertex loop or the edge loops and apply the bevel tool. So to do this, hold on the Alt button and left click to select the edge loop, then press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool, and if I move my cursor away, then the bevel effect will be visible on the selected vertex loop. Now left click to finalize, and now in a similar way, I'll select this vertex loop, then press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool and left click to finalize. Then in the end, I'll select this one, then press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool and left click to finalize. Now let's also add some loop cuts for the bottom part of the treasure chest. So for this, press Ctrl plus R to add a loop cut, then left click and we'll drag it above and left click to finalize. Similarly, let's add one more loop cut for the bottom part. So press Ctrl plus R, then left click and drag it down. After this, we have most of the face loops ready that we can use for the metal cage. However, on the side part, you can notice that we are having these 4 vertices joined together because of adding a loop cut. However, we also need to connect these 4 vertices together to create the upper part of the metallic cage. So for this purpose, we'll be connecting this vertex with this one. And to do this, we have to use a tool in Blender which is called the knife tool. To access it, press K, and you will notice that your mouse cursor will turn into a knife. And if I left click anywhere on a face, then you will notice that a green point is created. And if I take my cursor away and left click one more time, then those 2 points will get connected with a purple line. Then if I press enter, then you will notice that on those 2 points, we are having 2 new vertices created with the geometry of the original object. And this is the use of the knife tool. It allows you to connect any 2 points together, whether they're already existing within the geometry or even if you want to create them randomly on the object. So for now, I'll press Ctrl plus Z to undo this, and we'll now use the knife tool to join these 2 points together. So press K to enable the knife tool. Then first of all, I'll take this tool on that particular vertex, then left click, drag the cursor away, and we'll take this point to the other vertex. Then left click and press the enter button. And by doing this, we are now having both of these points connected with each other. Now let's do the same thing with the other side also. So press K to enable the knife tool, then select this vertex, and after that, left click to select the other one. Then press enter to confirm, and with this, both of these vertices are also connected together. Now the next thing that we'll do is to create the metallic cage on this side part. You can see in the reference image that we need to have some faces on the side part also in order to create the metallic cage. And for this, press 3 for the face select mode, then select these faces, press I to insert and left click to finalize. And with this, we are now having this particular face loop that we'll be using to create the structure of the metallic cage. Moving ahead, let's do the same thing with these faces also. So with all of them selected, press I to insert and left click. And with this, the basic structure of the treasure chest is completely ready. Now before selecting the faces for the metallic cage, I will add one more loop cut on the corners in the front side. So let's add one loop cut over here, and similarly press Ctrl plus R to add another loop cut over here. After this, press 3 for the face select mode, and we'll be selecting all the required faces. So with the Alt and the Shift key holded, select this face loop, then select this one, and in a similar way, we'll be selecting all the face loops that we'll be using for the metallic cage. Let's also select this one, then with the Alt and the Shift key holded, select this face loop also. After this, let's select the face loop on the sides also. Similarly, on the other side also, hold down the Shift and the Alt key and select this face loop. Now to convert them into a metallic metallic cage, we'll first create a duplicate of the selected faces. So press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, then right click to cancel the movement, and now to add some thickness, press Alt plus E for the extrude menu and select extrude faces along normals. Then if I move my cursor up, then you will notice that the selected faces will begin to extrude along their respective normals. Now left click to finalize, and with this we are having the metallic cage structure ready for our object. Now suppose you want to convert this metallic cage that we created into a separate object, and to do this, first deselect everything, and then with the cursor over any face of the metallic cage, press L, and this will select all the linked faces. Now to convert the selected geometry into a separate object, press P, and this will open up the separate menu. From here, click on selection, and this will separate the selected geometry into a new object. Now if I return back to the object mode, then you will notice that we are having the body of the treasure chest named as cylinder, and then we also have this metallic cage as a separate object in the scene collection named as cylinder.001. Now moving ahead, let's now add some detailing to our model. So although we won't be creating this handle or this lock to keep the thing simple, but we'll work on creating these details on this metal cage like these tiny spherical structures. So for creating these details, let's first add a UV sphere in the scene. So press Shift plus A, then go to Mesh and select the UV sphere. Let's move it in the X-axis and place it over here. Now press Tab to enter the edit mode. Now press S to scale it down and left click to finalize. After this, return back to the object mode, press 3 on the numpad, and with the UV sphere selected, press G to move it and place it over here. Press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and we'll move it down in the Z-axis, Shift plus R. By using this shortcut, the same step will get repeated any number of times. Now go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad. Let's zoom out, and we'll now select all these UV spheres. Let's move them in the X-axis and place them over here. After this, let's scale them up slightly, and let's also place them on the other parts of the metal cage on the front side. So press Shift plus D to create a duplicate and move it in the Y-axis like this. Let's create more duplicates, place them over here. Similarly, let's do the same thing one more time, and with this, we have added some detailing on the front side of the metal cage. Similarly, we'll do the same thing for the back side also, and for this purpose, let's select all these UV spheres, but along with that, the treasure chest and the metallic cage is also selected. So to deselect them, hold on Ctrl, and then if I left click and drag my cursor like this over those objects that I want to deselect, then on releasing, those specific objects will get deselected. Now to create the duplicates, press Shift plus D, and we'll move them in the X-axis like this and left click to finalize. And with this, we have this 3D model of a treasure chest ready with some detailing added to its metal cage. Now the next thing that we'll do is to create a slight opening in the middle part of the treasure chest, which you can also see in this reference image. So for this, I'll select the cage, press Tab to enter the edit mode, then we have to select this edge loop at the center. So press 2 for the edge select mode, then select the edge loop by holding Alt, and to create the opening, press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel effect, then left click. Let's also scale it down slightly in the Z-axis, and now we'll be deleting all these faces by pressing X and selecting delete faces. With this, we have created a small opening for the treasure chest. Now what we're gonna do is that we'll be opening this lid or the top part of the treasure chest, but to do that, we first need to separate out this entire geometry on the upper part of both the main body as well as the metallic cage. So for this, with the Shift key holded, I'll first select the main body, and then we'll select the treasure chest. Then with both of them selected, press Tab to enter the edit mode, and now we have to select all the faces on this top part. So first step is to enable the X-ray mode so that we also select the faces at the back part. Then press 3 for the face select mode, and now we'll be selecting all these faces on the top side. After this, to convert them into a separate object which will be used for creating an opening, press P, and in the separate menu, click on selection. Now return back to the object mode, and with this, we are now having these two new objects created with the names cylinder.002 and the cylinder.003 for the upper body, but we'll join them together. So first of all, select both of them by holding the Shift key, then press Ctrl plus J to join them together. After this, if I press R to rotate it, then you will notice that we are able to rotate the entire upper body of the treasure chest in a proper way. However, to make sure that this lid or the upper part rotates in such a way that it looks like it is actually opening, we need to have the pivot point, or basically the hinge point, or in even simpler words, the point around which the rotation will occur on this back part. And for this purpose, we'll be placing our 3D cursor at this position. And to reposition the 3D cursor, hold down the Shift button and right click at a particular position. And because of this, the position of the 3D cursor will get fixed to that particular point. Now in this menu of the transform pivot point, select the 3D cursor so that the pivot point of the selected object will be changed to the 3D cursor. And now if I try to rotate the selected object in the Y-axis, then you will notice that we are able to rotate it properly in such a way that it looks as if it is being opened, and that is because its pivot point is set at the position of the 3D cursor. Now to make this smooth, right click and select Shade Auto Smooth. Now let's work on creating some materials for the treasure chest. So go to the material preview mode, and then with this upper part selected, we'll open the shader editor window. So for this, click on this icon and select the shader editor. Now create a new material, and to give it a wood-like texture, we'll be using the noise texture node. So press Shift plus A, then go to texture and select the noise texture. Let's place it over here, connect the factor socket to the base color, and to control the scaling, we'll be using a texture coordinate and the vector mapping node. So press Shift plus A, then in vector, select the vector mapping node, place it over here, connect the vector socket to the vector in the noise texture, and after this, let's also add a texture coordinate node. So press Shift plus A, then go to input and select the texture coordinate node. We'll place it over here, connect the object socket to the vector in the mapping node. Now to change the scaling, I'll go to the mapping node, and in the scale value in the x-axis, we'll increase this to somewhere around 30 or 40, and after this, to give some color to this texture, we'll be adding a color ramp node. So press Shift plus A, then go to converter and select the color ramp node. We'll place it in between the noise texture and the principal BSDF. Then in the first pointer, we'll keep the color to the default black, but for the second pointer, we'll change this color from white to brown color. So reduce the brightness, and in the color wheel, choose the brown color. Now to give this texture a 3D bump effect, we'll be adding a bump node here. So press Shift plus A, then go to vector and select the bump node. Let's place it over here. Now in the noise texture, take the factor socket and connect it to the height in the bump node. Then for the output, take the normal socket and connect it to the normal of the principal BSDF. Now to create a golden material for the metal cage, press tab to enter the edit mode, then deselect everything, and with my cursor over any face of the cage, press L, and this will select all the linked faces. After this, we'll be opening the material properties and click on the plus icon to create a new material. Now with all these faces selected in the edit mode, click on the assign button, and now we'll be creating the gold material. So first of all, in the principal BSDF, let's change the base color to the yellow color, and in the metallic nature, we'll increase the strength to somewhere around 0.9, and we'll also reduce the roughness value down to 0.1. After this, we'll be applying the wood material to the lower part of the chest. So with this selected, click here and select the wood material. Similarly, select the metal cage of the lower body, then click here and select the gold material. Now to see how it looks in the rendered version, we'll go to the rendered view, and let's also change the render engine from EV to cycles. Then for a proper lighting, click here and turn off the scene lights and the scene world. And finally, this is how our treasure chest will be looking with the wood texture and this gold metal cage. But one thing that we can notice here is that the bump effect of the wood texture is very high on this side. So to reduce this effect, go to the bump node in the wood material, and let's reduce the strength to a value of 0.1. Let's also reduce the distance value to 0.1 in the bump node, and now it looks better. Moving ahead, let's also apply the golden material to these UV spheres. So I've selected one of them, and with this, click on this icon and select this golden material. Now instead of selecting all of them individually and applying the material, we'll be selecting all of them together and use a shortcut to apply the same material. So for this, let's first select all of them with the shift key holded. Let's select the ones at here also, and once we have selected all of these UV spheres, we have to ensure that that specific UV sphere which is having the gold material already applied is to be selected at the end. After this, press Ctrl plus L for the link menu, and if I select the link materials, then that specific material will get applied to all the selected objects which was previously applied to only that UV sphere which we selected at last. Let's do the same thing for this side also. So first of all, I'll select this UV sphere and we'll apply the gold material to it. After this, let's select all the remaining ones, and then in the end, I'll select this UV sphere, then press Ctrl plus L and select link materials. Also with all of these selected, right click and apply Shade Auto Smooth. And after this, we are having this wood material and the golden metallic cage ready in our scene. Now the next thing that we'll be creating are some gold coins that will fall into the treasure chest. So for modeling the coins, let's return back to the object mode, and now let's add a cylinder object for modeling the coins. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll first scale it down in the Z axis. After this, press S to scale it down like this until we have a shape and size which looks similar to that of a coin. Then to give it a slightly curved look, we'll be using the bevel tool. So press Ctrl plus B, and I will move my cursor slightly away from the coin. Now left click to finalize and press the tab key to return back to the object mode. Now right click and apply Shade Auto Smooth. Let's also apply the gold material that we previously created to this coin. After that, to place it properly for the animation, we'll go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, press G to move it and place it over here. Also, let's move it upwards in the Z axis, so press G and Z and place it over here. Moving ahead, we'll be creating some duplicates of this coin, since we'll be creating an animation where all such coins will interact with each other just like they do in the real world while falling into the treasure chest. So go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad and press Shift plus D to create the duplicate, and we'll move it in the x-axis. Similarly, let's create one more duplicate and place it over here. Then to create some more duplicates, we'll be selecting all three of them together by holding the shift button, then press Shift plus D to create duplicate and move it down in the y-axis, and to repeat this step press Shift plus R 2 more times, and with this we are now having a total of 12 coins added in our scene. But to create some more coins that will be placed above these, let's first go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, turn on the X-ray mode by pressing Alt plus Z, and we'll now select all of these coins. After this, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and we'll move it up in the Z axis like this. Then to repeat the same step, press Shift plus R 2 to 3 times, and with this we are now having a much higher number of gold coins added in our scene. Now suppose I want that this gold coin should fall down and interact with the treasure chest and also with all the other coins. And to do this, we have to use a feature in Blender which is known as the rigid body physics. To enable it, with this coin selected, we have to open the physics properties. So click on this icon which has the name physics properties, and over here you have the rigid body physics. So if I left click on it, then the rigid body physics is now applied to the selected object, and its settings can be controlled in the physics properties. The first and the most important setting in the rigid body physics is the type of body. If active is selected over here, it means that on playing the animation, the object on which it is applied will move in the downward direction and will show the interaction with the other rigid bodies in the scene. To understand this in much more detail, let's change this window back from the shader editor to timeline editor. After this, press the space bar to play the animation, and now you will notice that the selected object moved downwards in the Z axis, and this is because of the rigid body physics. Now let's take the pointer back to the frame number 1, and the reason why this particular coin did not interact with the treasure chest is that we have not applied any physics on the treasure chest. As a result, it is not showing any interaction with this coin. So to solve this problem, I'll select this object which is basically the lower part of the treasure chest, and yes, do note here that we have not selected the metal cage but only the main lower body. Now go to the physics properties and select the rigid body physics. But right now, if I go to the 3D viewport and press the space bar, then you notice that because of applying the rigid body physics to both the coin as well as the lower body, both are moving in the downward direction. However, we want that even though both of them are rigid bodies, but the treasure chest should remain fixed at its original position so that the coin can interact with it. And to achieve this result, with the lower body selected, go to the rigid body physics, and in the type, change this to passive. Now if I go back to the 3D viewport and press the space bar to play the animation, then now we have a perfect animation created where the coin will interact properly with the treasure chest. However, if I try to change the angle, then you will notice that the coin is falling on the top surface of the selected object. And to solve this problem, we have to make some changes in the collision shape. So by default, the convex hull shape is selected, which is basically preferred for those objects having a very basic or a simple geometry. But in case of those objects having some empty space, we have to change the shape in collisions from convex hull to the mesh. Now we'll take the pointer back to the frame number 1 and press the space bar again, and now in this case, we notice that the coin will properly fall into the empty space of the treasure chest. Now to apply the same rigid body physics to the rest of the coins, let's again take the pointer back to the frame 1, and now we have to select all the coins except for the one on which the rigid body physics is already applied, because we'll be selecting it at last and then we'll copy the rigid body physics from that object. So to do this thing, press Alt plus Z to turn on the X-ray mode, and now we'll be selecting all these objects, but along with them, the light is also selected, and to deselect it, simply hold on the control button and cover the light under the selection. Now let's also turn off the X-ray mode, and now do ensure that you first deselect that particular coin on which we have already applied the rigid body physics, and then select it again by holding the shift button, and yes, also ensure that this specific coin is highlighted with the yellow color and all others with the orange color. This thing implies that the object with the yellow highlight is the active object. Now go to the object menu by clicking here, then go to the rigid body, and in this menu we have this option which is the copy from active, and if I click on it, then in this case we'll have the rigid body physics applied to all the selected objects. And now if I try to play the animation again by pressing the space bar, then in this case we have all the coins falling downward and interacting with the treasure chest. However, if I take the pointer around frame number 20 or 25, then you will notice that all of them are having a uniform rotation while moving in the downward direction. However, to give them a realistic look, we must give these coins some random rotation. So to do this, let's first select all these coins again, and after this, to assign a random rotation to each of these, go to the object menu, and in the transform, here you have the option of randomize transform, and if I select it and open this tiny menu at the bottom left corner, then from here we can control the amount of randomness in the rotation values. For example, if I change the rotation in the x-axis to 30 degrees, then in this case, all of these coins at the initial frame will now have a random rotation between 0 and 30 degrees. Similarly, to also give them some random rotation in the y and the z axis, go to the object menu again, and in the transform, we'll be selecting the randomized transform. Then in the random x, I'll enter 0 because we have already applied the randomized rotation in the x-axis last time. So in the y and the z axis, I'll change this value to 30 degrees, and with this, we are now having all these coins having completely random rotations. Now to check how the animation looks, press the spacebar again, Now if you look closely at the frame number 50, then you will notice that this particular coin is passing through the upper body or the lid of the treasure chest, and this is because we have not applied the rigid body physics to this object. So to solve this problem, I'll select this main body of the upper part, then go to the physics properties and select the rigid body physics. Then in the type, change this to passive, and also in the collision shape, change this to mesh. After this, let's try to play the animation one more time, and finally this time we notice that we have a perfect animation created where this particular coin also interacted with the upper body of the treasure chest. And with this, we are now ready to finalize our scene and even create a final rendered video of the animation. So for this, let's go to the rendered view, and now let's add a plane object in the scene which will be used for the base and the background. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the plane. But right now we have fixed the 3D cursor position at a different location. So let's undo this by pressing Ctrl plus Z, and now to shift the 3D cursor back to the world origin, we'll use the shortcut which is to press Shift plus C. Now let's again add the plane in our scene. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the plane, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll scale it up 10 times, or maybe let's double it up. Now return back to the object mode, and to place it properly, I'll go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, and we'll move the plane down in the Z axis. After this, let's change the angle, and for the background, let's go back to the edit mode, then press 2 for the edge select mode, and I will be selecting these two edges. Now press E to extrude them up in the Z axis and left click to finalize. After this, I will select these two edges together, press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool, and by using the scroll wheel, I'll increase the number of segments to make this section smooth. Now return back to the object mode and also apply the shade auto smooth. Now to see how the scene looks, let's go to the rendered view, and let's also change the base color of the plane. So with the plane selected, go to the material properties and create a new material. Then in the base color, I'll first reduce the brightness, and will also change the color to something like dark blue or maybe purple, and after this, press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view. Now to adjust the camera properly, let's go to the solid mode, then click on this icon to enable the lock camera to view, and I'll now change the view according to my scene. After this, we'll be working on the lighting part for the final render. So first of all, go back to the rendered view, then click here and enable the scene lights and the scene world. Let's also disable the lock camera to view by clicking on this icon, and now we'll work on adding some lighting for this scene. So I'll select this light over here, press 7 on the numpad to go to the top view, let's zoom out, press G to move it and place it on the front side. Now let's create a duplicate of this light, and we'll move it over here. Similarly, let's create one more duplicate for the back side and one last for this other side. Now go to the camera view again, and now we are having a very simple lighting in the scene, but to make it look even better, I'll switch to the solid mode. Now select these 4 lights by holding the shift button. Now create the duplicates, and we'll move them down in the Z axis. Let's also bring them closer, so press S to scale them down like this, and now we'll switch back to the rendered view. Then if you want, you can reduce the brightness of these lower lights to somewhere around 400 watts. Let's change the brightness for this light also. So I'll change the power to around 400 or 300 watts, and yes, you need to adjust these lights and their power or the color according to your own scene. For example, for the selected light, if I change the color to something like red, then you will notice a light shade of red being added around the selected light. Similarly, let's do the same for this light also. So I'll change the color to something like green, and then for this light, I'll change the color to the blue color. And with this, our scene is now completely ready. Now to render the animation and even save it in our PC, let's first go to the output properties by clicking on this icon, then scroll down, and we'll change the frame range in the ending value from 250 to 100. And that is because the total length of our animation is somewhere around 100 frames only, so there's no point of keeping the animation so long. Now to choose a particular location where you want to save the rendered video, you can click on the folder button in the output path and select that particular location. Then in the file format, do ensure to select this FFmpeg video, and with this, we are now ready to render the animation. So click on the render button and select render animation, and then this window will appear where you can see that our animation is being rendered frame by frame. Right now, the sample count is set to a very high number of 4096, but to reduce it, I'll close this window, and then in the render properties, go to sampling, and then in the render, reduce the number of maximum samples to something like 128, and even a value of around 50 samples will work fine. Also disable the denoisy for a much better quality. After this, you can render the animation, and this is the final animation that I have created. And so with this, we have now arrived to the end of this chapter. And not just the chapter, we have also arrived to the end of this course. This was the final chapter which taught you about some more modeling tools which can be used to make your 3D models look much more professional. And apart from this, we also learned about some new techniques like the rigid body physics, the cloth physics in the last chapter, and a lot more. And yes, if you want to share the animation that you have created of the coins and the treasure chest by joining the Discord server, whose link is added in the description of this video. And if you wish to download the 3D model of this treasure chest and the coins, or basically this entire Blender file, then you can join the Patreon, whose link is there in the description of this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and press that notification bell so that you can get timely updates about the upcoming courses. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.